My son Marcus told me I wouldn't get a single dime from my ex-wife Serafina's $83 million will. He sat there in that high-rise law office, smug his arm around his greedy wife Karen, just waiting for the final validation. The lawyer Alistair started reading. "And to my son Marcus Bishop." Marcus leaned forward, his smile widening, ready to claim his empire. But then the lawyer read one more sentence, a sentence Marcus never saw coming, and Alistair, he just smiled. "Before I tell you what that sentence was and how it wiped that arrogant smirk right off my son's face, I want to know where you're watching from. Let me know in the comments. And please hit that like button and subscribe if you believe that sometimes the quietest person in the room holds all the power. My name is Josiah Bishop. I'm 76 years old. And to my son, I'm just Old Joe, a failed jazz musician living in a small rent-controlled apartment in Harlem. It all started 4 days ago, the day Serafina died. I was polishing the ivory keys of my 1950s upright piano when the phone rang. It was Marcus. His voice was cold, sharp, and all business. "Dad, Mom's gone." I felt the air leave my lungs. Serafina, my Serafina. Even after 40 years apart, the name still held a power over me. She wasn't just my ex-wife. She was everything. "Oh, son," I whispered, my throat tightening. "I'm so sorry." She was a force of nature. I heard an impatient sigh on the other end, the sound of a man trying to get through a required courtesy. Yeah. Listen, the funeral is Tuesday. The will reading is Thursday at 10. At her lawyer's office, Alistair Hayes. I need you to do something for me." "Anything, Marcus. You know that." "Just try to look presentable," he said, and I could hear the cringe in his voice. "Wear a real suit, not whatever it is you play music in, and please shave. It's an important day." The sting wasn't in the words, it was in the tone. The same tone he'd used since he was 16, ever since he realized his mother had a penthouse on Park Avenue, and his father had, well, Harlem. He didn't know. He never bothered to ask. He never knew that Serafina's empire was built on my instincts. I remembered the night we signed the papers, 1975. We were sitting in this very apartment on a folding chair sharing a cheap bottle of wine. Serafina was brilliant, a shark, the best numbers woman I ever met. But I was the one who knew the rhythm of the city. I was the one playing gigs in forgotten neighborhoods, seeing the potential, feeling the pulse of the streets. "Joe, you're crazy," she'd said, looking at the papers. "Buy that rundown warehouse district in Brooklyn, it's a dump." "Sarah, trust me," I told her, tapping my fingers on the table. "The rhythm is changing, people are moving, buy it." She did. That warehouse district is now worth $20 million. We signed a partnership agreement right here. She was the face, the CEO. I was the silent founder, the soul. When we divorced, it was bitter. She screamed, I cried, she kept the empire, I kept my piano in this apartment. But we never ever dissolved that original partnership. $83 million. 41.5 million of that was already mine. "Dad, are you listening?" Marcus snapped, pulling me from my memory. "I'm serious. Don't embarrass me." His voice dropped lower, like he was sharing a mean-spirited secret. "Mom made it very clear. You are getting nothing. Understand, zero. That entire 83 million is coming to me. I just don't want you showing up looking like you and asking the lawyer for money or something. It's pathetic." I was about to hang up to tell him I didn't need his pity or his instructions, but then I heard her voice in the background. Karen, his wife, the one who looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her designer shoe. "Marcus, just tell him not to come," she hissed, her voice sharp and white. "It's for family, not for charity cases. Oh God, ask him if he needs bus fare. Wait, no, don't. He'll probably just take the money and spend it on booze." My hand tightened on the phone. Bus fare. Serafina and I. We hadn't spoken in years. Not really. But a month ago, she called me. Out of the blue. Her voice was weak, like a broken violin string. "Joe," she'd rasped. "Sarah, is that you? I'm sick, Joe. The real kind this time. And our boy, he's a fool." "What are you talking about?" "He's been corrupted," she whispered, and I heard her cough. "Corrupted by that woman. He thinks he's a shark, Joe, but he's just a guppy. He's trying to steal from me. From us. He doesn't know about the agreement. He thinks I'm just an old woman he can push aside." Serafina, what is he doing? I'm fixing it, Joe, she said, her voice suddenly strong like the woman I remembered. I'm fixing everything. Then she hung up. Now looking at the phone, I understood. Marcus was still waiting for an answer, still waiting for me to be the pathetic old man he thought I was. Don't worry, son, I said, my voice quiet, smooth as a low C sharp. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I'll be there. I hung up. They thought I was coming as a beggar. They had no idea I was coming as the owner. The taxi dropped me off in front of a stone cathedral on the Upper East Side that looked less like a church and more like a fortress for God. The street was lined with black town cars gleaming like wet onyx. Men in $1,000 suits and women in severe black dresses and veils were ascending the grand stone steps. I paid the driver, clutching the worn lapels of my own suit. It was the only one I owned. It was wool, perfectly clean, but it was from a time when shoulders were wider and trousers had cuffs. It was my father's suit, and it was the best I had. As I walked up the steps, I could feel the eyes on me. They weren't just looks, they were assessments. In this world, Serafina's world, you were summed up in the 3 seconds it took to walk from the curb to the door. My old suit, my worn leather shoes, my graying afro. I had failed the test before I even got inside. And there they were, just inside the massive oak doors, greeting the flood of politicians, real estate moguls, and Wall Street predators. My son Marcus and his wife Karen. They looked magnificent, like a royal couple in mourning. His suit was tailored so perfectly it looked like it was sewn onto him. Her black dress was simple, elegant, and I knew just by the cut of the fabric that it cost more than my piano. They were shaking hands, accepting air kisses, performing their grief beautifully. Marcus had his sad but strong face on. Karen had her tragic but composed mask firmly in place. I stood in line, waiting my turn, just another face in the crowd. When I finally got to the front, Marcus saw me. His smile, the one he was giving to a senator, froze. It didn't just fade, it froze. His eyes went wide, and I saw them do the calculation I had felt on the steps. They darted from my shoes up to my suit and to my face. Karen noticed his expression and turned. Her face, so perfectly arranged in polite sorrow, crumpled for a split second into pure, unadulterated disgust. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice a sharp hiss that cut through the somber organ music. "Is he really wearing that?" She didn't try to hide it. She wanted me to hear it. It was a slap meant to put me in my place. Marcus's face flushed dark red. "But, Dad," he stammered. He grabbed my elbow, his grip painfully tight, and pulled me out of the receiving line into a small alcove behind a marble pillar. His partners and Serafina's friends watched us, their eyes curious. "Dad, what are you doing?" he hissed, his voice trembling with rage and embarrassment. I came for the funeral, son, like you asked. Looking like that." He gestured wildly at my suit. "This is my mother's funeral. These are the most powerful people in New York. This is about our image, our legacy." I just looked at him. Our legacy. He had no idea. "Listen," he said, trying to get his composure back. "I can't have you standing in the front row. You don't fit." He wouldn't even look me in the eye. He was staring at my tie, an old silk one Serafina had bought me in 1978. "Dad, please," he said, his voice dropping to a desperate plea. "Can you just stand in the back, in the last row, where people won't see you? For me, Dad. For Mom's image. For Mom's image." I looked past him, past the crowd of expensive suits, to the front of the church. There, surrounded by an ocean of white lilies and gardenias, was her casket. Polished mahogany with solid brass handles. It probably cost more than my apartment. Serafina. They thought this was her, this display of wealth, this cold, hard, shiny performance. They thought this was what she built. My mind drifted away from Marcus's desperate, shallow breathing. I was back in 1975 in our tiny, steam-filled apartment in Harlem. I was 26, playing piano at a smoky club 5 nights a week. Serafina was 24, a brand new real estate broker, sharp as a diamond and just as hard. She was poring over city maps at our rickety kitchen table. "It's all trash, Joe," she'd said, frustrated, her pencil tapping. "Everything in Manhattan is locked up. The old families have it all." I'd just come home, my fingers still buzzing from a 3-hour set. I leaned over her shoulder, the smell of cheap coffee and her perfume filling my head. I looked at the map, not at the street names, but at the spaces. "What about this?" I said, pointing across the river. "Brooklyn," she scoffed. "Brooklyn, Joe, that's the end of the world. It's just abandoned warehouses and factories." "Exactly," I said. I started humming a bass line low and slow, dum 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 dum. "It's got rhythm, Sarah, it's got bones. Look at the lines, the subways are already there, the bridges are there, it just needs a new melody." She looked at me like I was crazy. "You want me to invest in a dump because it has rhythm. I want you to trust me," I said. "This is where the artists are going to go. This is where the music is moving. Buy that block, that old sugar refinery, buy it all." She argued for an hour, but in the end, she trusted me. She always trusted my rhythm. She took every penny we had and every penny I could borrow from my musician friends, and she bought that first block in Dumbo. That was the start of the $83 million. It wasn't her business school degree, it was my ear. It was the blues. "Dad," Marcus's voice brought me back. He was still standing there, shifting his weight, terrified I was going to make a scene. He looked at me with such pity. This poor old senile man lost in his own memories, dressed in a dead man's suit. I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. A real smile. "It's okay, son," I said, patting his arm, his expensive, tailored cashmere arm. "The back row is fine. It's better, even." He sighed a huge gust of relief. "Oh, good. Thank you, Dad. I knew you'd understand. I'll see you after." He hurried back to Karen's side, straightening his tie, instantly putting his grieving son mask back on. I walked down the long aisle past the rows of judges and bankers and socialites. Their perfume was so thick it was hard to breathe. I found a single wooden chair in the very last row in a dark corner by a stained glass window. I sat down, and I waited. The back row was perfect, because from here, I could see everything, and nobody could see me. I was in my apartment in Harlem. It was Wednesday night, the night before the reading of the will. I was just sitting at my piano, my fingers finding old familiar chords in the quiet of my living room. The music was like a companion, a ghost of the life I'd lived. Then a knock on the door, sharp, impatient, and completely out of place in this building. I already knew who it was. I opened the door and there they stood. My son Marcus and his wife Karen. They looked like they were visiting a zoo. Karen was clutching her designer handbag to her chest as if she was afraid the air in my hallway might steal it. Marcus looked at his polished shoes, avoiding my eyes. "Dad," he said, not waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." They walked past me into my home. Karen's eyes scanned everything. My worn-out armchair, my bookshelf overflowing with old music, the framed photos of a life she never cared about. Her upper lip twitched just for a second. "Josiah," she said, her voice dripping with fake syrupy concern. "We came because Marcus is so worried about you." I sat in my armchair, the old springs groaning. I just looked at them. "Worried about what, Karen?" Marcus paced back and forth, unable to stand still. "Dad, look, tomorrow is going to be a hard day. For you." He took a deep breath like he was about to do me a great favor. "When Alistair, the lawyer, when he reads the will, well, I don't want you to be shocked." "Shocked about what, son?" I asked again, my voice quiet. "That you get nothing," he blurted out. "She told me. Mom made it very, very clear. The entire 83 million, it's coming to me, to us." He stopped pacing and looked at me with this terrible, practiced pity. "I just don't want you to be blindsided. I don't want you to, get emotional in front of everyone. It wouldn't be dignified." I felt a cold, slow anger rising in my chest. Not for the money. Oh God, no. But for the assumption, the arrogance. He had rehearsed this. He had practiced how to tell his poor failed father that he was being left with nothing, as if I were some beggar waiting for a handout. Then Karen, the problem solver, stepped forward. She sat on the edge of my sofa, careful not to let her expensive coat touch the fabric too much. "And that's why we're here, Josiah," she said, placing a glossy, colorful folder on my small coffee table. "Because we care. We want you to be taken care of." I looked down. The folder had a bright yellow sun on the cover. The words Golden Sunset Assisted Living were written in a cheerful, bubbly font. I looked at her. I didn't say a word. It's a wonderful facility, she continued, her voice bright and brittle. Top of the line. They have activities and medical staff on call 24/7. We just think, at your age, it's time to move to a place where you can be properly looked after. My blood ran cold. I realized in that instant they weren't just warning me. They were trying to get rid of me. They were trying to have me packed up and shipped out before the will was even read. They were terrified I would show up at that lawyer's office and make a scene, that the poor old musician would beg for scraps and embarrass them in front of the lawyer. Marcus, seeing his opening, knelt beside my chair. "And the best part, Dad," he said, his voice low and confidential, Don't you worry about the cost. With my inheritance, I can pay for the first month's deposit for you. It's the least I can do." The insult was so profound, so complete, that I almost laughed. Pay for my first month, with my own money. I just stared at them. I wasn't seeing them anymore. I was hearing Serafina's voice. It was 3 a.m. a month ago. The phone by my bed rang, jarring me from a deep sleep. I hadn't heard her voice in 10 years. "Joe." It was a rasp, a shadow, the sound of someone worn down to the bone. "Sarah, is that you? What's wrong?" "I'm tired, Joe," she whispered, and I heard her cough, a dry, painful sound. "The treatments, they're not working." A cold grief, sharp and sudden, hit me. "Sarah, I'll come. Shut up and listen." She snapped, and for a second she was the woman I remembered. Our boy. He's a shark, Joe. A stupid, clumsy shark. "What are you talking about?" "He thinks I'm weak. He and that pale, greedy woman he married. They're circling. They think I'm just a dying old woman. They think I don't see them. They think I'm a fool." Her voice was trembling with rage, not weakness. "He's been trying to get into the trust, Joe. Our trust. He's been trying to get power of attorney. He thinks I'm senile." "What do you want me to do, Sarah?" "I'm fixing it," she said. "I'm fixing everything. But I need you to be strong. When the time comes, I need you to show up. Don't be old Joe from Harlem. Be Josiah. Be the man who built this with me. Be the man I married." Her voice softened. "Joe, our boy, he thinks he's a shark, but he doesn't know who the ocean is." And then she hung up. I came back to my living room, to the 2 small-time predators sitting on my sofa looking at me with those fake, pitying eyes. Karen was smiling, waiting for me to cry, to thank them, to be grateful for their scraps. Marcus was already looking at his watch, his good deed for the day almost done. I slowly reached out and picked up the glossy brochure. Golden Sunset. I murmured, my voice trembling just a little. I looked up at them, my eyes watery. I'm a performer after all. I know how to play a part. "Thank you, Karen. Thank you, son. It's a lot to think about. It looks nice. Thank you for caring about your old man." The wave of relief that washed over them was so obvious it was almost funny. Their plan had worked. The old man was broken compliant. He would go quietly. "Of course, Dad," Marcus said, standing up, all confidence now. He patted my shoulder. "We just want what's best for you. We'll see you tomorrow at the reading. Try to be strong." They couldn't get out of my apartment fast enough. I locked the door behind them. The silence returned. The Golden Sunset brochure was still on my table, a monument to their greed. I picked it up, walked calmly to my kitchen, and dropped it right into the trash can. I went back to my piano. "The ocean," I whispered to the empty room. I cracked my knuckles, a sound that echoed in the quiet. "Tomorrow," I said as my fingers found the keys. The tide comes in. The elevator doors opened onto a world of polished marble and hushed silence. 40 floors above Manhattan, the air itself felt expensive. This was Alistair Hayes's office, Serafina's longtime lawyer. It was a place built to remind you just how small you were and just how much power they had. I walked in my old suit, feeling heavier in the refrigerated air. The receptionist, a young woman who looked like she'd been carved from ice, glanced up at me, her eyes flicking over my clothes, and immediately dismissed me. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice flat, already annoyed. "I'm here for the will reading. Josiah Bishop." Her eyebrows shot up for a fraction of a second. She was probably expecting someone else. "They're waiting in the main conference room, down the hall to the left." I walked down the hall, my worn heels clicking too loudly on the marble floor. I could hear their voices before I saw them. I pushed open the heavy glass door, and there they were, Marcus and Karen. They were already seated at the head of a massive mahogany table, a table long enough to land a small plane on. They looked like they belonged. Their black attire was immaculate, so dark it seemed to drink the light in the room. Karen wore a single massive pearl at her throat. Marcus was checking his gold watch. They were performing the role of wealthy, grieving heirs. Karen saw me first. The fake concern from last night was gone. Her face hardened into pure irritation. "Oh, Josiah," she said, her voice loud enough to echo slightly in the cavernous room. "You made it. Did you get here all by yourself? You know they have shuttle services for seniors. It might be easier for you next time." I didn't say anything. I just stood in the doorway. Marcus shot up from his chair, his face flushing with that familiar, angry embarrassment. He walked over to me, not to greet me, but to manage me, like I was a stain on their perfect, expensive carpet. "Dad," he hissed, grabbing my arm. "What are you doing? We're about to start." He didn't pull me toward the table. He pushed me toward a single sad-looking chair in the far corner of the room next to a plastic plant. "Look, just sit here, okay, in the corner. This table is for the family. This table is for the family." He was disowning me right there in front of the empty chairs where the lawyers would sit. I was not family. I was the crazy old relative they had to hide in the corner. "We'll let you know what happens," he said, patting my shoulder in that condescending way he had. Then he turned his back on me and returned to his wife, to his throne. So I sat in the corner and I watched them. They didn't speak to me again. They didn't look at me. They went back to their world. Karen was texting furiously on her phone, probably telling her friends about the 83 million. Marcus was staring at the head chair where Alistair would sit, practicing his look of somber importance. They thought I was humiliated. They thought I was broken. They thought I was sitting here terrified and pathetic. They didn't know I was comfortable. I wasn't in their world. They were in mine. I knew this room. I'd been here before late at night decades ago. Alistair Hayes wasn't just Serafina's lawyer. He was our lawyer. I looked at the framed painting on the wall. An original abstract. Serafina had wanted to buy a generic landscape. I'd told her to buy this one. "It's got tension, Sarah," I'd said. "It's what the future feels like." I was right. It was now worth $2 million. Marcus and Karen had no idea. They just saw an old man in a corner. The door opened. Alistair Hayes walked in. He was 70 years old like me, but he wore his age like a custom-made suit. He was tall, sharp as a razor, an old-school Harlem power broker who had moved downtown but never lost his edge. He was one of the most dangerous lawyers in New York, and he was my friend. He walked to the head of the table, his briefcase clicking open. "Mr. Bishop? Mrs. Bishop," he said, nodding curtly at Marcus and Karen. His voice was all business, cold and formal. Marcus puffed out his chest, rising slightly from his chair. "Alistair, a difficult day." Karen gave a small, rehearsed, "we're so brave" nod. Alistair didn't respond to them. His eyes scanned the room past them, past the empty chairs, and into the dark corner where I sat, and his entire face changed. The cold lawyer vanished, and my old friend appeared. A huge, genuine smile spread across his face, lighting up his eyes. He walked right past Marcus and Karen as if they were furniture. He strode across the room, his hand outstretched. "Joe," he boomed, his voice full of warmth. "You old son of a gun, it's been too long." I stood up and took his hand. A real handshake, firm. "Alistair, you're looking good. They treating you well down here?" "They try," he laughed. "But it's not the same. You still playing around midnight the way you used to, the way that breaks a man's heart. Only on Tuesdays." I smiled. Behind us, the silence was deafening. I could feel the confusion radiating from the head of the table. Finally, Marcus spoke. His voice was high, squeaky, and laced with a new dawning panic. You two, you know each other?" Alistair turned around. his smile vanishing, the cold lawyer mask snapping back into place. He looked at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. Know him? Alistair's voice was low and dangerous. Boy, your father and I were drinking bourbon and listening to John Coltrane at Minton's Playhouse back when you were just a stain on a bedsheet. I knew your father when he was just Joe. I knew him when he had the best left hand on the piano in all of New York. And I was the lawyer who sat right here in this apartment. He gestured at my memory and drafted the partnership agreement that built your mother's entire $83 million empire. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Your father, Alistair said, pointing at me, isn't a guest here, Marcus. He's the man who owns half the room. Now, if you don't mind, Mr. Bishop, he said, turning to me, not Marcus, please. Take your seat at the head of the table. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, the seat Alistair had insisted I take. Marcus and Karen were forced to sit further down, looking misplaced, their smugness from the corner chair now replaced by a sour, confused anger. They looked like children sent to the kids' table. Alistair Hayes sat opposite me at the other head of the table. He placed his old leather briefcase down, the one I remembered from 30 years ago. He opened it with two loud, definitive clicks that echoed in the silent, wood-paneled room. He took out a single thick document bound in a dark blue cover. He placed it squarely in the center of the table. He didn't open it, not yet. He just looked at Marcus, then at Karen, then at me. We are here today, Alistair began, his voice smooth and deep, filling the room, to read the final will and testament of Seraphina Bishop. As her executor, it is my duty to inform you that all prior wills and testaments are hereby rendered null and void. He paused, letting the finality of it sink in. After a final accounting of all properties, holdings, stocks, and liquid assets, the estate is valued at $83 million. 83 million. Even I hadn't known the final number. Sarah, you magnificent, terrifying woman. You did it. I glanced at Marcus. He wasn't breathing. Karen's hand shot across the table and seized his, her knuckles white. 83 million. I could see them doing the math in their heads. I could see the penthouse they were buying, the cars, the vacations. They had won. Even after the humiliation of the hallway, they had won. They were just seconds away from victory. Alistair put on a pair of gold-rimmed reading glasses. He looked over them not at me, but directly at Marcus. Mr. Bishop, he said, and the formality was a slap. Marcus, your mother was a remarkable woman. Yes, Marcus said, puffing up his chest. She was. She was also specific. Alistair continued, his eyes unblinking. Meticulous. She left me very clear, very precise instructions. I am to read this document exactly as it is written. Every single word. In the order it is written. There will be no deviations. Do you understand? Marcus just nodded, impatient. Yes, just get on with it. Alistair nodded slowly. As you wish. He opened the blue cover. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming. I could hear Karen's short, shallow breaths. I, Seraphina Bishop. Alistair began to read. Being of sound mind and body, do declare this to be my last will and testament. First, he adjusted his glasses. To my gardener, Emilio Rodriguez, for his 20 years of service and for keeping my roses alive even when I forgot they existed. I leave the sum of $50,000. I saw Marcus flinch. 50,000. To a gardener. Karen's eyes narrowed. That was a car. That was a year of shopping. Alistair continued, his voice a steady, unhurried monotone. Second, to my driver Thomas, I leave $25,000 and the Mercedes sedan. He always said he drove it better than I did, and he was right. Marcus shifted in his chair, clearing his throat. Alistair, is all this necessary? Can we skip to the main? I was instructed. Alistair cut him off, his voice like steel, to read every word. He turned the page. Third, to the Second Chance Animal Shelter in the Bronx, for their tireless work with stray cats. He paused. I had to look down at my hands. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. I leave the sum of $100,000. Karen made a small, strangled sound. Cats. $100,000. For cats. I couldn't help it. I let out a small chuckle. Marcus and Karen snapped their heads toward me. What's so funny, old man? Marcus snarled. I just shook my head, still looking at my hands. Nothing, son. Just remembering. I was remembering. I was remembering the time Serafina found a stray kitten on our fire escape in Harlem back in 1976. She'd hissed at it. Get out of here, the cat hissed back. Ugly, furry anarchist, she'd muttered. I hate cats. They're disloyal, they're selfish, they're just like people. She despised cats. I looked up at Alistair and I could see the barest trace of a smile on his lips. Oh, Sarah, you were always a performer. You were always a damn showman. You weren't just reading a will. You were setting the stage. You were warming up the band. You were playing the intro, making them wait, making them squirm, making them realize just how little control they had. That $100,000 wasn't a donation, it was a punchline. It was a joke from beyond the grave, and only Alistair and I were in on it. This wasn't a will. It was a performance. And Serafina, my beautiful, cruel, brilliant Serafina, she was about to bring the house down. Alistair turned the page again. The sound of the thick paper was like a drum roll. And now, he said, his voice dropping, we come to the principal heirs. I watched Marcus. He sat bolt upright, his knuckles white on the table. Karen had stopped breathing entirely. This was it. The $83 million moment. Alistair looked at them. Then he looked at me. And for the first time I saw the laugh he'd been holding back. To my son, Marcus Bishop, he read. Marcus's eyes closed, a look of pure victory on his face. Alistair continued. I leave exactly what he deserves. Alistair Hayes cleared his throat. It wasn't a cough. It was a sound designed to command silence. He looked up from the will, his eyes passing over me past Marcus and settling on a point on the far wall. The showman was on stage. And now, he said, his voice dropping into a formal, sonorous tone, we come to the primary beneficiary, to my son, Marcus Bishop. Marcus let out a breath he'd been holding for 45 years. His eyes shut, his head bowed as if in prayer. But it wasn't prayer, it was victory. Alistair continued reading. Because he has always admired my wealth far more than he ever admired me as a person. Because he values the price of things but never the worth of them. I leave to him my entire estate. All properties, all monies, all stocks, all subsidiary companies, and all controlling interests. The words hit the room like a bomb of gold. Marcus couldn't breathe. He literally gasped, his hand flying to his chest. Beside him, Karen just exploded. It wasn't a small cry. It was a loud, gasping, theatrical sob. Tears streamed down her face, instantly washing away her perfect makeup. "Oh, Marcus!" she wailed, grabbing his arm. "Oh my God, we did it! We did it!" Marcus, still in shock, just stared at the lawyer, his face pale and slick with sweat. Then slowly he turned his head. He looked down that long mahogany table, at me in my corner chair. He didn't just look. He smirked. It was the smuggest, most arrogant, most dismissive look I have ever received in my 76 years of life. He gave me a little shrug, a tiny lift of his shoulders that said it all. See, old man, I won. I was always the smart one. I was right, and you were wrong. You are nothing. He turned back to his weeping wife. I just sat there, my hands folded in my lap. I watched them. I watched my son embrace his wife, patting her back as she sobbed into his expensive suit. Karen lifted her head, her face a mess of mascara and triumph. She looked at me, her eyes shining with malice. She leaned in and whispered to Marcus, but in that silent, stunned room I heard every single word. "It's over," she whispered, her voice giddy. "It's finally over. 83 million. We can finally sell that disgusting little rat hole in Harlem and get him out of our lives for good." Marcus didn't scold her. He didn't even flinch. He just squeezed her hand tighter. I saw Alistair Hayes watching them. He didn't look at me. He just watched them. He let the moment stretch. He let them bathe in their victory. He let them truly, fully believe they had won. He let them twist the knife in the old man in the corner. I thought of Serafina. I thought of her call. "I'm fixing it, Joe." She wasn't just fixing a will. She was writing the last act of a play. And this was the climax. She knew her son. She knew he would do this. She knew he would be this small. Alistair let the silence hang for 1 second more. 2, 3. Marcus finally turned back, his face all business, his voice suddenly deep and authoritative. Well, Alistair, that seems clear enough. If you can just get the paperwork started. Alistair Hayes held up one long, elegant finger. Mr. Bishop, he said, cutting Marcus off, I was not finished reading the sentence. The air in the room didn't just get quiet. It turned solid. It turned to ice. Marcus's triumphant smile didn't fade. It froze. It cracked. It became a permanent, horrified grimace. Karen's sobs stopped instantly, cut off as if by a switch. Her head snapped up, her mouth still open. What? Marcus whispered. Alistair looked down at the document, then back up at Marcus. His face was a perfect neutral mask. He reread the last part. I leave to him my entire estate, all properties, all monies, all stocks. I leave it all to him. And then he delivered the final beautiful, deadly word. Provided. Provided. One word. One word that changed everything. One word that turned $83 million from a statement into a question. Marcus just stared. The color drained from his face, leaving it a sickly grayish white. Karen's hands flew to her mouth, but this time it wasn't for joy. It was to stifle a scream. Provided what? Marcus choked out, his voice a dry croak. What condition? Alistair Hayes let the word provided hang in the air, a single note of doom in the marble tomb of a conference room. Marcus's face, still frozen in that triumphant grimace, began to twitch. Provided, he stammered the word, sounding foreign, like a language he didn't understand. Provided what condition? Karen, who had been sobbing with joy, hiccuped. Her tears stopped, her eyes wide and wet, suddenly full of a new sharp fear. Alistair Hayes adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses. He looked down at the will, then back up at Marcus. His face was utterly devoid of emotion. He was a messenger reading a dispatch from a queen. I will read the clause in full, he said, his voice level. I leave my entire estate to my son Marcus Bishop, provided that this distribution and all subsequent divisions of assets adhere strictly to the terms of the original partnership agreement signed on May 10, 1975 by and between Serafina Bishop and Josiah Bishop. My name. The sound of my name hit the room like a physical blow. Marcus just stared. His brain, so fast at calculating his inheritance, couldn't process this new information. What are you talking about? What partnership agreement? He suddenly let out a sharp, barking laugh, a laugh of pure panic. That's nothing. That's void. They were divorced. They divorced 40 years ago. That document is meaningless. He was looking around at me, at Alistair, looking for someone to confirm his reality. They hated each other. She wouldn't... That's void, right, Alistair? Tell him... Alistair Hayes folded his hands on top of the document. He looked at Marcus with something that bordered on pity. No, Mr. Bishop, he said, his voice soft but carrying all the weight of the law. It is not. What do you mean, it's not? Marcus yelled, finally losing his composure and slamming his fist on the mahogany table. They got a divorce. That is correct, Alistair said, not flinching. Mrs. Serafina Bishop and Mr. Josiah Bishop, they dissolved their marriage. They never ever dissolved their company. My mind flashed back to that night, the arguments, the screaming, the broken dishes. Serafina, her face wet with tears, her eyes blazing with a fury that could burn down a city. I want you out, Joe. I want you out of my life. Fine, I'd yelled back. You can have the life, Sarah. You can have the penthouse and the cars and the whole damn show, but I keep the soul. I keep Harlem, and I keep my half of the music. And Alistair, a younger. Alistair had sat between us, his head in his hands as we hammered it out. The divorce was personal. The business, the partnership, that was sacred. We both knew, even in our rage, what we had built. We knew neither of us could have done it alone. She was the numbers. I was the rhythm. Alistair's voice brought me back to the present. The original partnership agreement, he explained as if to a child, was the foundational document for Bishop Enterprises. It was never amended. It was never voided. It states very clearly in Article 3 that Serafina Bishop would act as the public-facing chief executive officer, and Josiah Bishop would act as the silent founder and chief creative investor. He let that sink in. And, Alistair continued, it stipulates, that all assets, profits, and properties acquired by Bishop Enterprises from that date forward are to be divided 50-50. Marcus's face was white. 50. Alistair smiled. A thin, precise, devastating smile. Yes, Mr. Bishop. That $83 million estate you were so concerned about. It was never your mother's to give. Only half of it was. He looked at me sitting in my corner in my old suit. The other half, $41.5 million, already belongs to your father. Karen, who had been frozen, suddenly found her voice. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a sob. It was a shriek, a sound of pure primal greed being thwarted. No! She screamed, lunging to her feet, her chair crashing backwards onto the marble floor. That's a lie! She pointed a trembling, manicured finger at me. That's impossible. He's a nobody. He's a poor old musician. He lives in a dump in Harlem. He plays in bars for pocket change. He's poor. She was panting, her face blotchy and red, her mask of civility completely shattered. She looked at Alistair, her eyes wild. You're lying. He's trying to steal it. This is a scam. This old fool is trying to steal our money. Alistair Hayes just watched her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even frown. He simply waited for her to run out of air. When she finally stopped gasping for breath, he spoke. He is not poor, Mrs. Bishop. He just chose not to live like you do. He turned back to the will as if her entire tantrum had been nothing more than a passing breeze. And now, he said, if you will allow me to continue, we can discuss what happens to Serafina's half. Marcus was panting, his mind racing. You could see him trying to recalculate his entire future. The $83 million was gone. But, wait, so what? He finally stammered, his eyes darting between me and Alistair. So what, it's $41.5 million. That's still my mother's half, that's still my inheritance. He was clinging to it, the last piece of the shipwreck. He forced a wet, ugly smile. So I'm not as rich as I thought, but $41.5 million, I can live with that, right? Just read that part, the part where she gives me her half. He was looking at Alistair, desperate for validation. Karen was nodding beside him, her face blotchy. Yes, she urged. Read the part about Marcus. Alistair Hayes sighed. He looked down at the will as if it pained him. Not so fast, son. That phrase again. It hung in the air. Marcus's smile vanished. What do you mean, not so fast? You just said half was hers to give, and she gave it to me. You read it. I read the condition. Alistair said, his voice quiet but firm. And the condition states that her bequest, her $41.5 million, must adhere to the original partnership agreement. So, what does that mean? Marcus snapped. Alistair turned a page in the thick original partnership contract, the one from 1975. He ran his finger down a long paragraph. It means, Alistair said, that we must now observe Article 7, Section 4, the Power Clause. The what? Karen whispered, her voice cracking. The Power Clause, Alistair repeated. Serafina and Josiah put it in to protect the company from outside influence, or internal incompetence. He looked up, his eyes locking directly with Marcus's. It states, and I quote, in the event of the incapacitation or death of the CEO, Serafina Bishop, all major financial transactions, acquisitions, sales, and distributions, including but not limited to the disbursement of inheritance, must be unanimously approved by the remaining founding partner, Josiah Bishop. He let the legal jargon settle. It gives your father, Alistair said, clarifying the legalese, complete and total veto power. Veto, Marcus's voice was a squeak. Veto my inheritance. Precisely, Alistair said. Your mother left you her $41.5 million if your father agrees to give it to you. I had to close my eyes. I hadn't known about this part. This was all Sarah. This was her masterpiece. I remembered a fight we had years ago after Marcus had crashed his first sports car. He was 20. Serafina had bought him a new one the next day. You're spoiling him, Sarah, I'd argued, following her around her new massive penthouse. I'm preparing him, Joe, she'd snapped, pouring a brandy. He needs to look the part. He needs to be strong. He doesn't need to be strong, he needs to be smart, I'd yelled. He's reckless. He's got your ambition, but he doesn't have your guts. He doesn't have your head. He'll destroy everything we built, Sarah. He'll sell it all for parts inside a year just to impress a girl. She had stopped the brandy glass halfway to her lips. She stared at me, her eyes cold. I know, she'd whispered. I know he's weak, Joe, but he's my son. She had never mentioned it again, but she had been listening. She knew I didn't care about the money. I had proved that by living in Harlem for 40 years, but she knew. God, she knew. I cared about the legacy. I cared about the bricks and the mortar and the rhythm of the streets we had conquered together. This clause wasn't a gift to me. It was a failsafe. It was her last brilliant, ruthless move to protect our life's work. From our own son. I opened my eyes. Marcus was gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white. He looked like he was going to be sick. Karen was the one who finally put it all together. Her voice was a horrified whisper. Wait a minute. His half is already his, and he has veto power over her half. That means... She stopped. She looked at me. Not at the poor old man, not at the failed musician. She looked at me, Josiah Bishop, for the very first time. Alistair Hayes closed the original partnership agreement. The sound was like a vault door slamming shut. It means, Alistair said, answering her unfinished question, that as of this moment, your father-in-law is the sole decision-maker for the entire $83 million estate. He gestured to me, the man in the corner, the man in the 30-year-old suit. In other words, Alistair said, a small, satisfied smile finally touching his lips. The entire $83 million, every single penny, belongs to him. Marcus's face, that mask of pale, sweaty shock, went through 100 different emotions in a second. Disbelief, rage, and then calculation. He was a shark, just like his mother. He was already looking for a new angle, a new victim. He looked at me. Not at Alistair, at me. Okay, he said, his voice a desperate wheezing thing. Okay, so you have veto power. That's fine. Karen caught on her eyes, lighting up with a sick, frantic hope. Yes, he's right. You have to approve it, Josiah. But she still left it to him, to Marcus, her son. Marcus stood up, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender, of negotiation. Dad, Joe, you wouldn't veto your own son, would you? I mean, my God, we're family. Family, that word again. Karen jumped in, her voice suddenly sweet and pleading. Josiah, Dad, we can work this out. You don't need all that money. You live simply. We can give you some of it, a lot. We can give you $1 million all for yourself. Wouldn't that be nice? $1 million. They were trying to bribe me with my own $41.5 million. My God. Serafina, you really did know him. Marcus saw I wasn't responding, and the panic rose again, higher this time, strangling his voice. She wouldn't do this. She wouldn't give you this power. She hated you. She told me, after the divorce, she said she never wanted to see you again. She said you were a failure, a good-for-nothing musician living in the past. She would never give you control over me. He was spitting, his face red, his fantasy of $83 million slipping through his fingers, and he was clawing at the air to get it back. I just sat there. I looked at Alistair. Alistair looked at me. Hate, Mr. Bishop. Alistair finally said, his voice smooth as old bourbon. That's a very simple word for a very complicated relationship. Your mother and father, they were fire and ice. They couldn't live together, but they were never truly apart. I thought of her call, her last call. Be the man I married. What Marcus saw as hate was a bond. It was a 40-year-long argument between two people who were the only ones in the world smart enough to challenge each other. It was a respect so deep that Marcus, in his shallow world of cars and suits, could never ever understand it. Alistair continued. Your mother was not a sentimental woman, but she was not a fool either. She knew your father's character, and she knew yours. He paused, and then he delivered the line that would end the performance. Which brings us, Alistair said, a faint, sad smile on his lips, to the most interesting part. Marcus froze. What interesting part. Just give me the papers. The ones for him to sign. The veto. Alistair looked genuinely confused. Papers for what, son? There are no papers for you. You seem to be under the impression, you and Mrs. Bishop, that Serafina left her $41.5 million to you pending your father's approval. Yes, Marcus shouted. You said provided. You said... I said the bequest adhered to the partnership agreement. Alistair corrected him gently. That was the condition on the entire estate. We haven't yet discussed the actual disposition of Serafina's personal half. The room went so quiet I could hear the blood pounding in my own ears. Marcus's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Karen just stared her eyes wide, unblinking. Alistair picked up the blue-bound will again. Let's be very clear, he said, so there is absolutely no confusion. Your father, Josiah Bishop, already owns $41.5 million of Bishop Enterprises as per the 1975 agreement. That is, and always has been his. He turned the page. This document, he said, tapping the will, only concerns the disbursement of Serafina's personal $41.5 million, her half, and she left it. He paused. He looked right at me. To Josiah Bishop. Silence. Absolute, profound, perfect silence. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Marcus didn't move. He didn't blink. He just deflated. As if his skeleton had suddenly been ripped out, leaving only a very expensive empty suit. Karen made a small gasping sound like a fish on a dock. Alistair leaned forward, his voice becoming gentle. She also left a personal note, Marcus. Not part of the legal text, but she was specific. That I read it aloud to you in this room. He cleared his throat. To Joe, he read. My breath caught. You were right about everything. About the buildings, about the music, and about the boy. He isn't ready. He's weak. He's got my greed, but none of your strength. He'll burn it all down. Marcus let out a tiny broken sound. So I'm giving it to you, Joe. All of it. The part that was always yours and the part that was mine. You know what to do with it. You always did. Protect our legacy. Fix our son. Alistair Hayes slowly, deliberately closed the blue cover. The thud of the heavy paper was the sound of a coffin lid closing. He looked at Marcus, his face now completely neutral, all business. In summary, Mr. Bishop, Alistair said, your mother left you nothing. Your father gets everything, the full $83 million. This meeting was in effect a formality, to inform him of his new assets, and to inform you of your new reality. The final word from Alistair's mouth, everything, just hung there. Karen made a sound I will never forget. It was not a cry of grief. It was an animal sound, a low guttural wail of loss, the sound of a future being ripped away. She didn't just sit down. She collapsed. Her body gave out. She fell sideways into the empty chair beside her, her head hitting the mahogany table with a dull thud, and she began to sob, ugly, gasping, messy sobs. No, no, no. She choked out, mascara streaming down her pale face. My life, it's gone. We lost everything. Everything. Marcus just stood there, his body vibrating, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists at his sides. He was staring at me. His face was no longer pale. It was a deep, terrifying purple. You, he whispered. His voice was raw. You. And then he exploded. He didn't just walk. He lunged. He lunged across the corner of the table, sending a crystal water glass flying, shattering on the marble floor. He came right at me, his face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. You! He screamed, jabbing his finger an inch from my face. You did this. You snake. You sat in your dirty little apartment playing your stupid songs, pretending to be a failure. You were manipulating her all along. He was spitting his eyes, wild with rage. You lied to me my entire life. You let me think you were nothing. You let me. You're a liar. You're a thief. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even lean back. I just stood up. I stood up slowly, unfolding from the corner chair. And for the first time in my life, I looked down on my son. I let him see the 76 years in my eyes. I let him see the man he had never bothered to know. My voice, when it came out, was cold. It was quiet. It was final. "Sit down, Marcus." He stopped, his hand still in the air. The command in my voice shocked him into silence. "I didn't lie to you, son," I said, my voice cutting through his heavy breathing. "I didn't lie about a single thing. I lived my life. I live in Harlem. I play my piano. I wear the clothes I like. That is all the truth." I took a step toward him. He took an instinctive step back. "You," I said, pointing not at him but at his own chest, "are the one who has been lying to yourself. You are the one who built a fantasy. You never once in 45 years asked me a single real question about my past. You never asked how I met your mother. You never asked what I did before you were born. You never asked why she and I were partners in the first place. You never asked about the music. You never asked about the clubs. You never asked anything. All you ever saw," I said, my voice dropping, "was the old suit. All you ever saw was the Harlem apartment. You saw what you wanted to see. A failure, a simple old man, because it made you feel superior. It made you feel like the successful son." Marcus's mouth opened, but no words came out. And in that silence, I finally let myself think about why Serafina had done it. I finally understood her last move. She had called me that last time, her voice like gravel. "The boy's stealing from me, Joe," she'd whispered. "Small amounts at first, from the expense accounts. Now, bigger. He thinks I'm sick. He thinks I'm not watching. He's bleeding the company." I'd known, of course. Alistair and I had been watching it for a year, but I didn't say anything. "And that wife of his," Serafina had spit the words, "that pale, greedy creature. She's already picking out furniture for the penthouse. She's telling her friends she's the next Queen of New York. They're vultures, Joe. They're stupid, clumsy vultures. What are you going to do, Sarah?" "I'm going to do what I always do," she'd said. "I'm going to protect the legacy. I'm going to protect what we built. They will not burn it down. I won't let them." This wasn't a punishment. This was a solution. She knew they were reckless. She knew they were greedy. She knew they would destroy her life's work in a year, selling it off for parts to fund Karen's shopping and Marcus's ego. She didn't leave the empire to me to be cruel to him. She left it to me to save it from him. I looked at my son. His face was crumbling. The rage was gone, replaced by a dawning, horrifying understanding. "You're right," I said to him, my voice a little softer now. "I did keep a secret. But it wasn't my money. My secret was that I saw you, Marcus. I've always seen you. I saw your jealousy, your insecurity, your desperate need to impress people who don't matter. And your mother, she saw it too." He just stared at me, the truth of it all finally landing. He hadn't just been disinherited. He had been exposed. Karen's face was a terrible sight. The tears of triumph had turned to tears of pure, unadulterated panic. She scrambled up from the chair she had fallen into, her expensive black dress, wrinkled her knuckles white. She wasn't looking at Alistair. She was looking at me, the poor failed old man in the corner who now held all the cards. "You can't," she shrieked, her voice cracking, echoing in the quiet, expensive room. "You can't do this. He is your son, your only son. He is your blood." I just looked at her. I didn't say a word. You owe him," she screamed, her voice rising with hysteria. "You owe him for leaving. You owe him for not being there. You owe him for being a nobody while his mother built an empire. You owe us, that word, the anthem of the entitled, the cry of the greedy, the justification for every terrible thing they had done. They hadn't just wanted the money, they felt they were owed it, as if their existence was a debt I had to pay. Marcus was still frozen, a statue of his own broken dreams. But Karen was a fighter. She was a cornered animal, and she was ready to claw her way out. "I'm going to fight this," she screamed, her eyes wild, darting between me and Alistair. This is coercion. It's elder manipulation. He's senile. He doesn't know what he's doing. We'll sue. We'll take you to court. We'll prove you're incompetent." Alistair Hayes, who had been patiently waiting, finally looked up from his papers. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even sigh. He looked at her as if she were a mildly interesting insect. Sue him, Mrs. Bishop, on what grounds? That he owns his own company, that his ex-wife in a moment of perfect clarity left him her half of the partnership they built together. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. What exactly are your legal grounds that you are disappointed? You... She stammered, her rage failing her. Actually, Alistair said, his voice suddenly smooth as silk, while we are on the subject of legal action, we have a few problems. With you, Karen. Karen's mouth snapped shut. Alistair continued his professional calm, more terrifying than any scream. Mr. Josiah Bishop, as the new, or rather the fully recognized, owner and sole director of Bishop Enterprises, had a single request upon assuming control of the accounts this morning. He paused, letting the words sink in. He reached down into his old leather briefcase, the one I knew so well, the one that held 40 years of our secrets. It was like a magician's hat, and he was about to pull out a monster. He requested, Alistair said, a full, immediate, and retroactive audit of all family-related trust funds and expense accounts. Marcus finally came back to life. He looked up, his face pale and confused. An audit? What? What for? Those are my accounts. Mom set those up for me, for my expenses. Precisely, Alistair said. Serafina was very generous. She established a trust fund for you, Mr. Bishop, with a rather substantial monthly stipend for expenses, travel, clothing, to maintain the image, as you both seem so fond of. Alistair pulled out a different folder. This one was thin, red. It looked dangerous. He slid the red folder across the polished mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Marcus. The audit, Alistair said, was completed by our forensic team 2 hours ago. He looked at Karen. Her face had gone from red to a sickly mottled white. We discovered, Alistair said, a recurring anomaly, a series of transfers. Small at first, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, all authorized by the secondary signatory on the account. Marcus frowned, his brow furrowing. Secondary signatory, I'm the only one. I'm the only one who can sign. He stopped. His head turned slowly, mechanically, like a rusted machine. He turned and looked at his wife. Karen wasn't looking at him. She was staring at that red folder, staring at it as if it were a bomb. She was as pale as a ghost. She was shaking. It appears, Alistair continued, his voice a relentless, calm monotone, that over the last 3 years, a total of $250,000 has been embezzled from your trust fund, Mr. Bishop. Embezzled, Marcus whispered the word, his voice cracking. Transferred, to be precise, Alistair said, as if correcting a child's homework. Wired directly from your New York trust account to a numbered offshore account in the Cayman Islands. An account opened, interestingly enough, just 1 week after your wedding. He paused, then delivered the final line. An account held solely in the name of Mrs. Karen Bishop. The silence in that room was absolute. It was the sound of a final, fatal betrayal. Karen had been stealing, not just from the Empire, not just from me. She had been stealing from him, the man she had just been weeping all over. Marcus didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stared at her. His face was blank, completely unreadable. Karen, he whispered. She didn't answer. She couldn't. She just shook her head back and forth, tears of a different kind. Tears of pure, unadulterated panic starting to flow. Marcus, baby, it's not what it looks like. It was for us. It was a surprise, an investment. I was saving it for us. An investment. Alistair interjected, his voice laced with ice. He glanced at a paper from the red folder. An investment in a 2023 Maserati. An investment in 3 separate first-class trips to Paris. Alone. An investment in a private villa rental in St. Bart's that you listed on your social media as a gift from a client. Every word was a nail in her coffin. Marcus still hadn't moved. He just watched her. The man who had 10 minutes ago lost $83 million had just realized he'd also lost the $250,000 he thought he had. He had lost everything, and he had been played for an absolute fool by everyone in the room, especially his own wife. "Karen," he said again, his voice still a whisper, but now it was a whisper of ice. "What did you do?" She finally looked at him, her eyes wide, desperate, realizing the man she had married was not going to protect her. "Marcus, please, you have to understand. With your mother, I never knew if—" "What did you do?" he roared, his voice finally breaking the sound of a man who had lost his entire world in the span of 30 minutes. "You stole from me. You were stealing from me." He looked at me. He looked at Alistair. He looked back at his wife. The shark had finally realized he wasn't the predator. He was the bait, and he had just been eaten alive. Marcus's roar, "You stole from me," was still hanging in the air. The realization had shattered him. He had lost the 83 million, and now the 250,000 he thought he had. He looked utterly destroyed. But Karen wasn't destroyed. She was cornered, and a cornered rat is the most dangerous animal in New York. Her desperate sobs stopped. Her face, which had been pale with fear, suddenly flushed dark red with pure, unadulterated rage. She wasn't just afraid anymore. She was angry. She had been caught, and she was going to drag everyone down with her. She turned away from Marcus. She turned away from me. She pointed a shaking, accusing finger right at Alistair. "You can't pin this on me," she shrieked, her voice a piercing, ugly sound that scraped against the marble walls. "I didn't do this alone. You think I'm the only one. You think I'm the mastermind." Alistair just raised an eyebrow. "The Cayman account is in your name, Mrs. Bishop, alone." "The account?" She spat as if the word was meaningless. "The idea, the plan. That was him." She wheeled around and pointed not at me, but at her husband, at Marcus. "It was his idea," she screamed. "From the beginning, ask him. Go on, ask him." Marcus recoiled as if she had slapped him. What are you, Karen? What are you saying, you liar?" "I'm the liar." She laughed a horrible broken sound. "Oh, that's rich. That is perfect. You stood there. You let them blame me. You coward." She turned to me and Alistair, her eyes wild. "He told me to do it. He said it was the only way. He said his mother was too old to manage her own money, too senile to notice." Marcus lunged at her. Shut up, Karen." Alistair just said, "Mr. Bishop, I advise you to remain seated." Karen ignored Marcus completely. She was in survival mode. "He called it a management fee." She screamed the words, tumbling out in a frantic confession. "That's what he told me to call it. We're just managing her money for her baby. It's our right. She owes us. That's what he said. He owes us." "Liar!" Marcus roared again. "He said it was the only way to get money out without the old woman finding out." She shrieked, finally using the words she'd whispered in my apartment. "He said she was too stupid and too old to know what was happening. He said she'd be in a nursing home soon anyway, and we deserved to get our inheritance early." "That's not true," Marcus yelled, his voice cracking with panic. He looked at me, his eyes begging. "Dad, she's lying. She tricked me. She's the one who handled the accounts. I'm too busy. I didn't know." He turned back to Karen, his face a mask of betrayal. "You told me it was your money. You said it was a private real estate investment, a side hustle." "A side hustle?" Karen laughed, the sound full of venom. "A side hustle that paid for your suits? A side hustle that paid for your gambling debts? You think I didn't know about that, Marcus? You think I didn't know you were losing thousands every week? That's a lie." "Is it?" Karen snarled. "Ask him, Alistair. Check the records. See how many times money was transferred from my investment account to his personal line of credit right before his trips to Atlantic City." And there it was. The truth. It wasn't one of them. It was both of them. They weren't just partners in marriage. They were partners in crime. They had been systematically bleeding Serafina's accounts, our accounts, for years. A two-person conspiracy of greed. He stole from the corporate side. She stole from the personal trust. And now that the light was on, the cockroaches were scattering, climbing over each other to get to safety. I looked at Marcus, my son, the man who 30 minutes ago thought he was inheriting $83 million. The man who 10 minutes ago thought he was getting $41.5 million. The man who 5 minutes ago discovered his wife had stolen $250,000 from him. And now the final truth. He knew about it all along. He was in on it. My mind flashed back to Serafina's last call, her voice thin as paper. He's bleeding the company Joe, unexplained expenses, things that don't add up. He thinks I'm not watching. I had thought he was just incompetent, foolish, a bad businessman. I thought he was just weak. I never realized he was a common thief. I looked at them. They were still screaming at each other. You ruined us, Marcus. Your stupidity, your gambling. Me, you and your insane spending, the cars, the trips you couldn't stop. They were destroying each other. They were doing my job for me. The hatred they had reserved for me, the old man, was now fully unleashed on each other. They were two sharks in a feeding frenzy, realizing the only thing left to eat was themselves. Karen, seeing she was losing, played her last card. She turned to me, her face suddenly collapsing back into that fake theatrical mask of tears. "Josiah," she sobbed, reaching a hand out to me. "Dad, please, you have to believe me. He forced me. He threatened me. He said if I didn't help him get the money, he would leave me. I was scared. I did it for love. You understand that, don't you? You're a good man. You understand love." It was a performance, a desperate final performance. She was betting everything that old Joe from Harlem, the simple, naive musician, was still in the room. She was betting that I was a fool. I let the silence sit. I let her sob hang in the air. I watched her. I watched my son, who was now silent, watching me, waiting to see if I would fall for it. I turned my head. Not to them, but to Alistair. He was watching me too. He had a small, almost imperceptible smile on his face. He was waiting for my cue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just said 2 words. "Alistair, call the police." Karen's sob cut off as if a hand had been clapped over her mouth. Marcus just closed his eyes. Alistair Hayes reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his cell phone, and pressed a single button. "They're waiting downstairs, Joe," he said. "I thought you might say that." Alistair didn't even dial. He just pressed a button on the intercom on his desk. "Security, please send up the officers we have on standby." On standby. Serafina and Alistair had known. They had anticipated every move. They knew this was always how it was going to end. Karen, who was still screaming about her stolen future, froze. "Officers. What officers?" The conference room doors opened and 2 uniformed NYPD officers walked in. They weren't security guards, they were the real thing. They were calm, professional, and they walked right past me, past Marcus, and stopped directly in front of Karen. "Mrs. Karen Bishop," the first officer said, his voice polite but firm. Karen just stared, her mouth open, her face a mask of disbelief. "You are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud." "No," she whispered. "No. Marcus. Marcus, do something." She shrieked, her voice high and panicked. Tell them it's a mistake." The officer took her arm. "Ma'am, you need to put your hands behind your back." She tried to pull away. "No, get your hands off me, Marcus. He forced me. Tell them, Marcus. Tell them it was all your idea." But Marcus wasn't looking at her. He was watching the officer's hands. He was watching the silver handcuffs slide out of their leather pouch. The officer pulled Karen's hands behind her back. And then we all heard it. The sound that broke the world. A sharp metallic click, click, click. That sound. That simple sound. It wasn't the 83 million. It wasn't the lies. It was the click of those handcuffs. That was the sound that finally, completely and utterly shattered my son. He turned to me. His face. I will never forget it. All the arrogance, the anger, the entitlement. It just evaporated. It vanished. He looked like a child. A terrified, lost child who had just set the house on fire and knew finally that the punishment was real. "Dad," he whispered. And then, my son. My 45-year-old proud, arrogant son who had looked down on me his entire life. He fell to his knees. Right there on the polished marble floor of the 48th floor conference room, he just collapsed. He crawled the last 2 feet and grabbed the fabric of my old wool trousers, bunching it in his fists. "Dad, please," he sobbed, his voice breaking, his body shaking. "Please don't let them. Stop them. Tell them it's a mistake. A, a family misunderstanding. Please, Dad, don't let them take her." He was weeping openly, snot and tears running down his face, clinging to the legs of the man he had dismissed as a failure. I'll give it all back," he choked out, his voice muffled by my suit. I'll work for free. I'll do anything. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Dad. I was wrong. I was so wrong." I didn't move. I didn't touch him. I just looked down at the top of his head. "Why, Marcus?" I asked. My voice wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was just tired. "Why did you do it? Why all of this?" He looked up at me, his face a ruin of desperation and shame. And the truth, the real, ugly 45-year-old truth, the truth he had hidden behind a wall of expensive suits and arrogance, it finally came pouring out. I just wanted to be like her," he screamed, his voice raw and broken. "I wanted to be like Mom. I wanted to be powerful. I wanted to be rich." He let go of my legs and slammed his fists on the floor, a child's tantrum in a grown man's body. "I didn't want to be like you," he wailed, the words tearing out of him. I never wanted to be a failure, a poor musician. I didn't want to be poor." And just like that, the room dissolved. The police, the crying, Karen being led out the door, Alistair watching from his desk. They all faded. It wasn't a 45-year-old man kneeling in front of me. It was a 10-year-old boy. I was back in my Harlem apartment. It was 1990. Marcus had just come home from a weekend at Serafina's brand new penthouse. He was wearing tiny designer sneakers I couldn't pronounce the name of. He stood in my kitchen, his arms crossed, looking at my old refrigerator with pure contempt. "Dad," he'd asked, his voice sharp with a child's simple, devastating cruelty. "Why are we poor? Why is Mom rich and you're poor?" I'd knelt then just as he was kneeling now. I'd put my hands on his small shoulders. "We're not poor, son," I'd told him, smiling. "We have music, we have our neighborhood, we have love. We're rich in other ways." And Marcus, my 10-year-old son, had looked me dead in the eye. He didn't understand. He didn't want to understand. "Those things don't buy a car, Dad," he'd said. And he'd shrugged my hands off and walked away. He had never changed. I came back to the present, to the cold marble floor, to the broken 45-year-old man at my feet still weeping. "I didn't want to be poor like you." I looked down at him. The emptiness I felt was replaced by a profound, heavy sadness. The final piece of the puzzle. "You don't want to be like your mother, Marcus," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He looked up, his face slick with tears, confused. "You just wanted her money," I said. "You never understood her, not for a second." I paused, letting him see the truth in my eyes. "And you never, ever understood me." The heavy glass doors of the conference room swung open again. The two officers holding Karen firmly by each arm began to lead her out. She had stopped fighting, her body limp, but her voice was still filled with venom. She twisted her head, her ruined, tear-streaked face pointed at my son. "You're not pinning this on me, Marcus," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the marble. "You coward, you won't get away with this. He was in on it. He told me to do it. Tell them." Marcus didn't even look at her. He just stayed on his knees, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking. A broken 45-year-old man weeping on the floor of a billionaire's office. Karen was halfway out the door when the senior officer, a man with a gray mustache and tired eyes, stopped. He looked at Karen, then at Marcus on the floor, and then he looked at me. He walked over, his footsteps heavy. He stood in front of me, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Bishop," he said, his voice low and respectful. I just nodded, my eyes still on my son. "Sir," the officer continued, "your daughter-in-law is making a serious accusation. She's claiming your son was not just a participant, but the mastermind behind the embezzlement." He gestured with his chin toward Marcus. "She's saying he coerced her, that he's as guilty as she is, maybe more." I remained silent. I knew the truth. They were both guilty. They were two ends of the same rotten stick. The officer sighed. "Legally, sir, based on her testimony and his name being on the trust she was stealing from, we could arrest him as an accomplice right now. We could take them both." He paused, letting the full weight of the situation settle on me. It's your company that was defrauded. You're the victim here. It's your call, Mr. Bishop. Do you want to press charges against your son, too? This was the moment. The entire room, the entire $83 million, the legacy of Serafina, the last 45 years of my life. It all came down to this single, terrible question. Do you want to destroy your son? I looked at Marcus. He was frozen, his head still bowed, listening, terrified to even breathe. He was my son, my blood. The 10-year-old boy in the designer sneakers who just wanted a car. The man-child who had broken my heart, despised my life, and plotted with his wife to steal from a woman on her deathbed. He was a thief. He was a liar. He was weak. He was a fool. I thought of Serafina. Fix our son, she had said. How do you fix something this broken? Do you destroy it and throw it away? Or do you strip it down to the bare wood and see if it can be rebuilt? Prison. Prison would destroy him. It would finish him. He wasn't like me. He wasn't like Serafina. He didn't have that fire, that rhythm. He wouldn't survive. He would be eaten alive, and the man who came out, if he ever came out, would be a monster. I looked at the officer. I saw the pity in his eyes. I took a deep breath. It felt like the first breath I had taken in 40 years. No, I said. My voice was quiet, but it was the loudest thing in the room. No charges. Just her. I heard the sound. It was the sound of my son's soul re-entering his body. A ragged, desperate, gasping sob of air. His shoulders slumped and he collapsed forward, his forehead touching the cold marble floor in pure, unadulterated relief. He thought he was free. He thought he had won. He thought old Joe, his soft, pathetic father, had saved him. I let him believe it for one more second. Then I walked over to him. I didn't offer him a hand. I just stood over him. Get up, Marcus. My voice was not his father's. It was the voice of the owner of Bishop Enterprises. It was the voice of $83 million. He flinched. He scrambled to his feet, wiping his nose on the sleeve of his $5,000 suit. Dad, he wept. Dad, thank you. Oh God, thank you. I didn't do that for you. I said, my voice cutting him off like a razor. He froze, his tear-streaked face a mask of confusion. What? You're not going to jail, I said, looking him dead in the eye. But my forgiveness is not free. Your mother's will gave me control, and I'm going to use it. You won't go to prison, Marcus, but you will lose everything. He didn't understand. Not yet. I turned away from his stupid, confused face. I looked at Alistair, who was watching this whole family tragedy with the calm patience of a sphinx. Alistair, I said. Alistair nodded, pulling out a small notepad. Joe. As of this moment, Marcus Bishop is terminated as an employee of Bishop Enterprises and all its subsidiaries, for cause, gross misconduct, embezzlement. Done, Alistair said, writing it down. But, Marcus stammered. My job. You don't have one, I said without looking at him. Furthermore, Alistair, freeze all his corporate credit lines, all of them. Revoke his access cards to this building. Revoke his access to the company jet. Cancel his expense account immediately. Already in progress, Joe. The penthouse, I continued. The one on Park Avenue. It's a company asset, correct? Correct, Alistair said. A corporate apartment. Good. Have security change the locks, this afternoon. The car he drives, the one Karen was bragging about, that's a company lease too, isn't it? It is, Alistair said. Have it repossessed. Tonight. Dad. No. Please. Marcus was grabbing at my arm now, his panic real. Dad, that's my home. That's my car. Where will I go? What will I do? I finally turned to look at him. I looked at my son, a 45-year-old man who had never earned a single thing in his life. I don't know, Marcus, I said. You have 24 hours to get your personal belongings out of the penthouse. After that, you are trespassing. I held his gaze. I let him see the cold, hard truth he had avoided his entire life. You always looked down on my life. You always despised my nothing. You were terrified of being a poor musician like your father. I buttoned my old wool jacket. Well, congratulations, son. You're about to start from absolute scratch. Let's see what you're made of. Marcus just stared at me, his mouth open, his mind failing to catch up with the speed of his own destruction. Start from scratch, he repeated, his voice hollow. Dad, I'm 45 years old. I don't know anything else. My entire life. I worked for Mom's company. I can't live in Harlem. The way he said Harlem. He said it like it was a death sentence. He said it with the same disgust Karen had, the same revulsion. After everything that had just happened, after he had begged for his freedom on his knees, that was what terrified him. Not the loss of his wife, not the loss of his dignity, but the loss of his zip code. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. The last flicker of pity I had for him, it just died. It went out. Then I suggest you learn, I said, my voice flat, holding none of the fatherly warmth he was used to. I'm 76 years old, Marcus, and I learn something new every single day. I learn new music, I learn about new people, I learn how to be quiet and listen. You stopped learning the day you decided you already knew everything. I walked past him toward the door. I didn't want to be in that room anymore. I didn't want to breathe the same air as him. You've spent your entire life, I said, my hand on the doorknob, being ashamed of my apartment, ashamed of my life, ashamed of me. I turned to look at him one last time. He was just a pathetic, crumpled figure in a suit that cost more than my rent for a year. Well now, you can't even afford the rent in my dirty little rat hole. You couldn't get a co-op board in my building to approve you if you begged. You have no job, you have no credit, you have no collateral, you have nothing. You have finally truly become the poor person you were always so terrified of. He flinched as if I had hit him. You think I don't know how to work? I asked, my voice rising just a little, the old rhythm of my past coming back to me. You think Serafina didn't know how to work? My mind went back. 1970, I was 21. I didn't have money for music school. I wanted to be near the greats. I wanted to hear Art Tatum, Miles Davis. I wanted to breathe the air they breathed. So I got a job. I told him, my voice distant, remembering. My first job in New York. I wasn't playing the piano. I was sweeping the floors at Minton's Playhouse. I mopped up spilled whiskey and cigarette ash at 3 a.m. just so I could stand in the back and listen, just to be near the music. I earned my way to that piano note by note, broomstroke by broomstroke. And your mother, you think she was born in that penthouse? She started as a secretary in a dump in Queens, sharing a desk with 3 other women. She worked 18-hour days. She ate cold meals from a vending machine. She fought every single day against men who told her she was too loud, too ambitious, too much. We worked, Marcus. We built that $83 million out of nothing but grit and instinct and sleepless nights. I looked at him, my son, who had never known a single day of real struggle in his entire pampered life. You never worked a day in your life, I said. You were given a title. You were given an office. You were given a trust fund. And all you ever did, was figure out new ways to spend the money we earned. He didn't say anything. He couldn't, because it was the truth. He looked down at his hands, his soft, manicured, 45-year-old hands that had never seen a callus, that had never known the ache of real labor. He finally understood. It wasn't that I was secretly rich. It wasn't that my old suit was a costume. The suit was real, the apartment was real, the music was real, I was real. The penthouse, the cars, the 83 million, that was the costume. And he was the one who had been wearing it his entire life. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I didn't see a shark. I didn't see a child. I didn't see a fool. I just saw a man, a broken, lost, empty man. He had just realized the truth. His mother hadn't trusted him. His wife had betrayed him. And his father, the man he had dismissed as a failure, was the only one who had earned any of it. He had earned nothing. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I had looked back, I might have seen the 10-year-old boy again, and I didn't have the strength for that. I had to see the 45-year-old man who had made his choices. I just nodded to Alistair. He nodded back. It was done. I walked out of the conference room. I left my son Marcus still crumpled on the floor, a broken heap of expensive wool in a tomb of mahogany and marble. I walked down the silent carpeted hallway, my old shoes making no sound. I got into the elevator. It was mirrored glass and gold. I saw my reflection. Just an old man in a tired suit. I looked the same. But I wasn't. The elevator doors opened onto the grand lobby. People bustled past, their faces buried in phones, their minds on mergers and acquisitions. They didn't see me. I was invisible, just as I had always been in this world. A doorman in a ridiculous heavy coat rushed to open the massive glass door for me. "Cab, sir?" he asked, his voice polite but mechanical. I looked at the line of black town cars waiting at the curb, their engines purring. I could have taken any one of them. I could have bought any one of them. I could have bought the whole damn fleet. I just shook my head. "No thank you," I said. "I'm walking." I stepped out onto the sidewalk of Midtown Manhattan. The air was cold, the noise was a roar. People pushed past me, a river of ambition and anxiety. I buttoned my coat and walked to the corner past the luxury storefronts that Serafina had loved so much. I walked 2 blocks east and descended the concrete steps into the ground, down into the noise, down into the truth. I swiped my transit card and pushed through the turnstile. The smell of the subway hit me. Ozone, hot metal, and something uniquely, eternally New York. It was the smell of reality. I stood on the platform waiting for the express train. Not a limo, not a private car, the subway. Serafina had hated the subway. She said it was for people with no options. I always thought it was for people who had nothing to prove. I liked the noise. I liked the rumble in the tracks that you could feel in your bones. It was a rhythm. It was the heartbeat of the city. The cold marble silence of Alistair's office. That was the sound of a morgue. This was the sound of life. The train roared in a dragon of screaming metal. I stepped inside and found a seat. The car was packed. A woman with a baby, a construction worker covered in dust, 2 teenagers laughing over a phone, a man in a suit just like Marcus's, but his was wrinkled and he looked exhausted, not entitled. This was my world. This was where I was real. I watched the city slide by in the dark window. I didn't feel like a victor. I didn't feel like a king. I just felt tired, bone tired. A 76-year-old man who had just lived through the longest day of his life. I had won. I had saved the empire. I had protected the legacy that Serafina and I had built from nothing. I had done what she asked. I had fixed it. But I had lost my son. No, that wasn't right. I hadn't lost him today. I looked at the reflection of the kid in the window nodding his head to the music in his earbuds. I had lost Marcus 40 years ago. I lost him the day he decided that Serafina's world of cold, hard, shiny things was better than my world of warm, complicated, messy feelings. I lost him the day he decided money was a destination instead of just a byproduct of the journey. I lost him the day he looked at my piano and saw a piece of old furniture instead of seeing the soul of our family. I had just confirmed the loss today. I had just signed the death certificate. The train rattled into the 125th Street station. I stepped out onto the platform. The air was different here. The sound was different. I could hear music from a vendor's boombox. I could smell roasted nuts and diesel fumes. I walked up the stairs and onto the street. My street, Harlem. This was my rhythm. I walked past the Apollo. I walked past the small bakeries and the barbershops, nodding to the men I'd known for 30 years. "Mr. Joe," they'd say. "Evening, fellas," I'd reply. They didn't know I was worth $83 million. They just knew I was Mr. Joe, the man who played piano down at the corner club, and that was all I ever wanted to be. I reached my building. I walked up the 3 flights of stairs, my knees aching a little. I unlocked the 3 deadbolts on my door. I stepped inside. The apartment was quiet. It smelled like old books, lemon oil, and a lifetime of memories. I didn't turn on the television. I just stood in the living room, my living room. I looked at my worn armchair. I looked at my upright piano, its keys yellowed by time. And I looked at the photographs on the wall, pictures of me and the band 30 years ago, pictures of my father. And then I saw it. The picture I always tried not to see. It was from 1974, before the partnership, before the money, before the split. It was just me and Serafina sitting on a fire escape in Brooklyn sharing a beer from a bottle. We were 25 years old. She was leaning her head on my shoulder, her hair a wild storm around her face. And we were both laughing, genuinely laughing. We were so poor, and we were so damn happy. We had it all. and we didn't even know it. I finally took off my coat. I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like a widower twice over. I had buried my wife 4 days ago, and I had buried my son today. I walked over to the piano. I sat down on the old worn bench. My fingers hovered over the keys. I didn't play a victory song. I didn't play a funeral dirge. I just played the blues. A slow, sad 3 a.m. Harlem blues. For what was and for what might have been. A song for 2 kids on a fire escape who had conquered the world and lost each other. And their son, somewhere along the way. A week. 7 days. That's how long it had been since I'd walked out of that marble tomb of an office. I was back where I belonged. The club was dark, smoky, and half full. It was a Thursday night. The air was thick with the smell of spilled beer, old wood, and the sweet, sharp scent of jazz. My fingers found the keys. They felt like an extension of my own body. I wasn't thinking. I was just playing. I was letting the music say the things I didn't have the words for. I played the blues. A low grinding 2 a.m. blues that spoke of loss and betrayal and a deep, weary sadness. I played for Serafina. I played for the 10-year-old boy Marcus used to be. I played for the 45-year-old man he had become. When I finished the set, the small crowd gave a polite, appreciative applause. I nodded, my eyes closed, letting the last note fade into the smoke. He always did play a sad song better than any man I know. The voice was deep, and it cut through the room's noise. I opened my eyes. Alistair Hayes was sitting at the far end of the bar in the shadows. He looked completely out of place in his razor-sharp $1,000 suit, like a hawk that had wandered into a pigeon coop. He had a glass of bourbon neat waiting for him on the bar. I wiped my hands on an old rag, stepped off the small stage, and walked over. The bartender, a young woman named Maya with a tattoo of a saxophone on her arm, slid my usual drink over, ginger ale. "You're a long way from Midtown, Alistair," I said, taking a sip. "The music sounds better up here, Joe," he said, taking a sip of his bourbon. "Always did." We sat in silence for a minute, just listening to the clink of glasses and the low murmur of the crowd. "So," I finally asked, "is it done?" Alistair swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "It's done," he said. "The kid's out." He didn't need to say who. "He vacated the penthouse this morning. Our security team escorted him." "Escorted?" He tried to argue, said his 24 hours weren't up, said he was going to sue. Then he tried to take a painting, the one you and Serafina bought in '79. I closed my eyes. The abstract, the one with the tension. My God. "Don't worry," Alistair said. My guys explained to him what company asset means. He left with 2 suitcases and a gym bag. That's it. The locks are changed. The car has been repossessed. "And her?" I asked. I couldn't bring myself to say Karen's name. Alistair's face hardened. "She's singing, Joe. She's singing like a canary in a coal mine. She's trying to make a deal. She's agreed to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a lighter sentence. She's giving them everything." "Everything." "Everything," he confirmed. "She's testifying that Marcus was the mastermind from day one, that he coerced her, that he threatened her, that she was a victim of his psychological abuse." I let out a dry, bitter laugh. "So the 2 sharks are eating each other. I'm not surprised." "It gets better," Alistair said, a grim smile on his face. "Her testimony combined with the bank records. The DA is now considering adding conspiracy to Marcus's list of problems if he can get another witness." "So where is he now?" I asked. "My son, the mastermind, crashing on a friend's sofa on the Lower East Side," Alistair said, taking another sip. "The friend is an old college buddy. I give him 3 days before he gets tired of the sob story. Marcus tried to open a new line of credit this morning. He was declined. Violently." He paused, then looked at me. "He's also trying to get a job." "A job?" "He's been making calls to all of Serafina's old friends, all the people who were at her funeral, the bankers, the real estate guys. And, Alistair said, "it turns out nobody in this city wants to hire a 45-year-old failed executive who just got publicly disinherited by his $83 million father, and whose wife is about to go to prison for embezzlement. The scandal is the talk of Wall Street. He's toxic, Joe. He's untouchable. I looked down into my glass. I should have felt something. Victory. Satisfaction. Justice. I felt hollow. You did what she asked, Joe, Alistair said, as if reading my mind. You fixed it. You protected the legacy. You saved the company. Did I murmured. Or did I just prove I was as ruthless as she was? Alistair put his glass down. Serafina was ruthless, Joe. You're just thorough. He leaned in, his voice dropping. Which is good, because the kid and his wife, they're not our problem anymore. I looked up. What is our problem, Alistair? The other sharks, he said. I knew exactly what he meant. They've been circling for a week, Alistair said, his voice all business now. Worthington, the hedge fund guys over at Apex, all of Serafina's old rivals. They smell blood in the water. They know she's gone. They know the company is in transition. They've heard the rumors. What rumors? Alistair smiled a grim smile. The same rumors Marcus believed, that the new owner is just a simple, senile 76-year-old piano player from Harlem who doesn't know what he's doing. So they're attacking, I stated. It wasn't a question. They're attacking, he confirmed. Worthington started a hostile takeover bid this morning. Apex is trying to poach our top 3 executives. They think the empire is undefended. They think the king is dead and the old jester has taken the throne. They think they're going to walk in and carve up Serafina's life's work for pennies on the dollar. I finished my ginger ale. I put the glass down on the bar with a quiet, definitive click. The smoke in the club seemed to clear. The music, the chatter, it all faded away. I looked at Alistair. They think Serafina was the only one with teeth. They do, he said. I smiled. They forgot who showed her where the hunting grounds were in the first place. I stood up from the bar stool. My knees ached a little, but I stood up straight. Call a full mandatory emergency board meeting, Alistair, I said. First thing tomorrow morning, in the main conference room. Alistair just nodded, a glint in his eye. And the agenda, Joe, the agenda, I said, turning to walk back to my stage, is that the silent founder is about to get very, very loud. I sat back down at my piano. My fingers found the keys. But I wasn't playing the blues anymore. I was playing a war drum. The next morning, I didn't take the subway. I took the Bentley, the one Serafina had left in the garage, the one Thomas, the driver, used to use, Alistair had insisted. The jester doesn't show up to the king's court on a donkey, Joe, he'd said. You're not arriving as Joe, you're arriving as Mr. Bishop. He was right. This wasn't about humility. This was about war. The car slid to a stop in front of the Bishop Enterprises tower. The doorman, the same one who had ignored me for 40 years, saw Alistair get out of the passenger side and rushed to open my door. He looked at me, my old wool suit, my worn shoes. He looked at Alistair. He looked back at me. His face was a perfect mask of professional confusion. Good morning, Mr. Bishop, Alistair said, loud enough for the doorman to hear. The doorman's eyes widened. Mr. Bishop, welcome. Thank you, son, I said, patting his arm as I passed. Keep up the good work. We didn't go to the 48th floor. We went to the 50th, the top floor, the boardroom. The doors were massive, carved from a wood I couldn't name. Alistair's assistant, a sharp young woman, was waiting. They're all in there, Mr. Bishop. They're anxious. Anxious is good, I murmured to Alistair. They're not anxious, Joe. Alistair whispered back, his hand on the door handle. They're sharks. They're just anxious for the feeding to start. Don't forget that. He pushed the doors open. The room was silent. I'd seen it before late at night with Serafina when it was just an empty monument. Now it was full. About 15 people, men and women, all dressed in the $10,000 uniform of the powerful, were seated around a table that looked like it had been carved from a single giant redwood. They all looked up as we entered. They were expecting, I don't know, a lawyer? An accountant? They were not expecting me. They all looked at Alistair. Then they looked at me. I could see the questions in their eyes. Who is this? The janitor? The caterer? Who is this old man in the cheap suit? I saw them. The board members Serafina had conquered. The ones she had bent to her will. the ones who both feared her and profited from her genius. They looked terrified. They looked like a flock of very expensive sheep who had just heard a wolf howl, and then I saw the man at the head of the table, the wolf himself. My blood didn't run cold. It ran hot. It boiled. I hadn't seen his face in 50 years. But you don't forget a face like that. Charles Worthington III. He was older now, his hair a perfect silver, his suit immaculate. But his eyes were the same cold, dismissive, pale blue eyes that had looked right through me in 1974. I was 26. Serafina was 24. We had just bought the first Brooklyn property. We were on fire. We had the rhythm. We just needed capital to expand. We went to his bank, the bank his great-grandfather had built. Charles Worthington III, a young arrogant man back then, had looked at our proposal. He'd looked at my black hands on his white desk. He'd looked at Serafina, who was practically vibrating with brilliance and rage. He'd smiled, a thin reptile smile. "Mr. Bishop," he'd said, "your projections are very creative, but our bank doesn't fund creative ventures. We fund sound business. And frankly, we don't think you two are the right fit for our portfolio." He had dismissed us. He had called me a boy. He had told Serafina to find a sensible husband. Serafina had grabbed my hand. "We're done here," she'd said, her voice shaking. We'd walked out. In the elevator, she'd looked at me. "One day, Joe," she'd sworn, "one day I'm going to own men like that." And now, here he was, chairman of her board. How she must have loved that. How she must have loved sitting at the head of the table making Charles Worthington III vote yes on her deals. He was the first to speak. He looked at Alistair, completely ignoring me. "Alistair!" He boomed, his voice full of that old money confidence. "This is highly irregular. We are in a crisis. The company is under attack. We were told the new owner would be here. Instead, you bring this." He gestured at me as if I were a piece of trash he'd found on the street. "Where is the new owner?" Another board member demanded, a woman with diamonds at her throat. "We've heard rumors that the entire estate went to some musician from Harlem." The word Harlem was said with such disgust it hung in the air like a bad smell. "This is a disaster," Charles Worthington said, slamming his hand on the table. "Serafina was a genius, but she's gone senile at the end. She's left the company in the hands of a nobody. We need to act. We need to vote. We need to seize control from this jester before he burns the entire empire to the ground." Alistair Hayes just stood there. He let them panic. He let them show their full, ugly, terrified faces. When Charles finally ran out of steam, Alistair quietly walked to the empty chair at the head of the table, the one Serafina had sat in. He pulled it out. He didn't pull it out for himself. He turned and looked at me. "Mr. Bishop," he said, "your seat." Every eye in the room followed me as I walked, my old shoes clicking on the floor. I walked past the terrified faces, past the diamond necklaces, past the $10,000 suits. I walked right up to Charles Worthington III. He was still sitting, staring at me, his blue eyes wide with a confusion so deep it was almost comical. He didn't understand. "Josiah," he whispered the name, a question, a ghost. "Josiah Bishop. Is that you? You're the..." I didn't sit down. Not yet. I just stood there looking down at the man who had tried to crush us 50 years ago. The man who had been profiting from our genius ever since. The man who was now sitting in my chair. I smiled, the same smile I'd given Marcus. "Hello, Charles," I said, my voice calm and clear. "You were right. I'm not the right fit for your portfolio. You're the one who's in mine." I looked at the chair he was in. "Serafina and she was the face. She was the one you saw. But I was the foundation." I put my old calloused hands on the back of his expensive chair. "And you," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that everyone in that silent room could hear, "are sitting on my land." Charles Worthington III stared at me. His pale blue eyes, which had held nothing but dismissal 50 years ago, were now wide with a dawning, sputtering horror. He looked at me, at Alistair, and back at me. "Josiah Bishop," he stammered. The piano player. You're the partner. You're the 41.5 million. He couldn't make the pieces fit. In his world, a man in my suit from my neighborhood could not possibly be the man on the documents. I didn't answer him. I just looked at the chair he was sitting in. My chair. I walked the rest of the way to the head of the table. I didn't ask him to move. I just stood there, waiting. He finally clumsily scrambled to his feet, knocking over his water glass. He backed away from the chair as if it were on fire. I sat down. The chair was heavy leather and it fit me perfectly. For a long, terrible moment, the only sound in the room was the drip, drip, drip of the spilled water hitting the expensive carpet. Every eye was on me. 15 of the most powerful executives in New York, and they were all holding their breath, waiting to see what the ghost in the cheap suit would do. Charles Worthington, ever the banker, was the first to find his voice. He tried to regain control, to reframe the narrative. He forced a laugh, a dry, cracking sound. Well, this is a surprise, isn't it? He said, looking around the table at his fellow board members. Joe Bishop. My goodness, it's been, 50 years? He composed himself, adjusting his silk tie. The fear was gone, replaced by a new, more dangerous emotion. Condescension. He saw an angle. Listen, Joe, he said, pulling up the chair next to him, sitting down, leaning in as if we were old friends. He was talking to me, but he was performing for the board. I'm glad it's you. Truly. Better you than some faceless corporation. He leaned in further. But let's be reasonable here. You're a musician. A fine one, as I recall. But this, he waved his hand around the opulent room. This is an $83 million empire. It's complex. It's got moving parts you can't possibly understand. The other board members started to nod. I could see them relaxing. Ah, yes. This made sense. The old man was in over his head. This company is under attack right now, Charles continued, his voice gaining strength. Our rivals think we're weak, that Serafina's passing has left a power vacuum. And frankly, Joe, you are not the man to fight that war. You don't know the game. So, he said, placing his manicured hands on the table, a picture of calm reason, here's what we do. For Serafina's legacy, we, the board, will offer to buy you out, all of it. The $41.5 million that was yours and the $41.5 million Sarah left you. We'll give you a reasonable price, a very generous price. You can go back to Harlem, back to your piano, infinitely wealthy. You'll be comfortable for the rest of your life. You won't have to worry about any of this. He smiled. Just sell it to us, Joe. Let the professionals handle it. I looked at him. I looked at his calm, reasonable, pale blue eyes, and I smiled. A reasonable price. I repeated, my voice quiet, just loud enough to carry. That's a funny choice of words, Charles, he frowned. What, a reasonable price? I said, leaning forward into the chair, feeling the power of it settle on my shoulders. Is that like the reasonable loan you denied Serafina and me back in 1974? Charles Worthington's face, it just stopped. The blood drained from it. He remembered. Or, I continued, is it like the reasonable decision you made when you said what was it you called us? Oh yes. Not the right fit for your portfolio. The entire boardroom went dead silent. The board members who had been nodding along with Charles were now frozen, their eyes darting between him and me. They could smell the history. They could smell the blood. Charles opened his mouth, but nothing came out. You're right about one thing, Charles, I said. I am a musician. I've spent 76 years learning one thing and one thing only, how to listen. I listen to the rhythm of the city. I listen to the silence between the notes. And I listen to the lies under the words. I looked around the table at all of them. You all sat here for years. You watched Serafina work. You watched her build this empire. And you all thought she did it alone. I leaned back in my chair. You fools, I whispered. You thought she was the genius. You think Serafina woke up one day and just guessed that a forgotten warehouse district in Brooklyn would be the hottest real estate on the planet. Guessed that Dumbo would be Dumbo. I shook my head, a slow, sad motion. She didn't guess. She listened. She listened to me. She was the face, I said, pointing a finger. She was the fire. She was the one who could walk into a room and make men like you tremble. But I was the foundation. I was the rhythm. I was the one walking the streets, playing the clubs, feeling where the city was going to move 10 years before you even read about it in your reports. I picked the properties, I chose the neighborhoods, I told her when to buy and when to hold. I let the truth land. I let them see the past they had ignored. Serafina, I said softly, had the business plan, but I had the map. I turned my full attention back to Charles Worthington III. He looked smaller now. He looked old. You're right, I said. I don't know the game you play up here. I don't know about hostile takeovers. I don't know about poaching executives. I just know how to build. And I know a bad investment when I see one. I looked at him and my voice was flat, no emotion, just a statement of fact. You're right, Serafina is gone. She was the face. But the rhythm is still here, and I'm the one leading the band now. I picked up a heavy pen from Serafina's desk. And my first act as the new chairman is to clean house. I looked Charles dead in the eye. You're fired, Charles. It had been a month, 30 days, since I had walked into that boardroom and taken back my company. 30 days since I had last seen my son. I was sitting in Serafina's office. My office, I hadn't changed it. Her massive desk of dark polished wood was still there. Her awards still lined the walls. Her view of Central Park was still breathtaking. I came here every morning not because I liked the view, but because I had to learn. I had to learn the language of this new world. I was spending 12 hours a day with Alistair and the accountants learning the arteries of my own empire. I wasn't wearing my old wool suit. I had Alistair buy me 10 of the same thing. Simple, black, well-made suits. My new uniform. I was still Joe Bishop. I just had a better tailor. My assistant's voice came over the intercom, a sharp, professional young woman Alistair had hired for me. Mr. Bishop, I'm sorry to interrupt. There's someone here to see you. A Mr. Marcus Bishop. He doesn't have an appointment. I leaned back in Serafina's chair, the leather side. It's all right, Cynthia. Send him in. I stood up, not out of respect, but out of reflex. I stood and I waited. The door opened. The man who walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. It wasn't Marcus Bishop, the Prince of Park Avenue, the man in the $5,000 suit, the man with the gold watch and the perfect, arrogant smile. This man was thin, gaunt. His face was hollowed out. His eyes were tired, and he had a scruffy, desperate-looking beard that hadn't been trimmed in weeks. He was wearing an old pair of jean sneakers with holes in them and a thin jacket that looked like it had come from a thrift store. He looked poor. He looked like I had looked in his imagination. He just stood there in the doorway, staring at me in my new suit in his mother's office behind his mother's desk. He looked like a ghost haunting the wrong house. "Dad," he said. His voice was a rasp. I need to talk to you." I just nodded. "Come in, Marcus. Close the door." He did the sound of the heavy door clicking shut, seeming to startle him. He didn't sit down. The plush leather chairs in front of my desk. He didn't even look at them. He just stood in the middle of the vast, expensive carpet, looking at his own worn-out shoes. I need to... He couldn't get the words out. He just stood there, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "What is it, son?" I asked. My voice was quiet, not angry, just quiet. "I'm working." He blurted out, the words bursting from him like he'd been holding them in for a month. I just waited. "Oh, yeah, I got a job." "Where are you working, Marcus?" He swallowed. His eyes were still glued to the floor. He was ashamed. After a lifetime of arrogance, he was finally truly ashamed. It's a coffee shop in Queens." He said it so fast I almost missed it. "A little place called The Daily Grind." "Doing what?" I asked. He was silent for a long time. I could see his shoulders shaking just slightly. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick. "Washing dishes," he whispered. I'm the dishwasher." I sat back down in my chair. The dishwasher. My son. The man who was supposed to inherit $83 million. I tried, Dad," he said, his voice cracking, the confession finally starting to pour out of him. "I tried to get another job. I called everyone. all of Mom's friends, all of my friends, the bankers, the guys from the board, Charles Worthington's people. He let out a dry, bitter laugh. The ones who didn't hang up on me. They just laughed. They laughed in my face. Marcus Bishop, they'd say. The one whose wife went to jail, the one who got disinherited by a janitor. The rumor. It got twisted. They didn't even get the story right. They just knew I was a joke. He finally looked up at me and his eyes were red. They were the eyes of a man who had not slept in a month. My name, Marcus Bishop. It's worthless, Dad. It's toxic. He paced back and forth, rubbing his face with his hands. I realized it was never my name. It was her name. I wasn't Marcus Bishop. I was Serafina's son. And the moment she was gone, the moment you took the money, I wasn't anything. The penthouse. They gave me 24 hours. I filled 2 suitcases. The rest, the doorman told me it was all in a dumpster by midnight. My friends, the ones I'd known for 20 years, their numbers were disconnected. The college buddy I was staying with, he gave me 3 days. His wife didn't like having a failure on her sofa. He stopped his back to me, staring out the window at the city that had chewed him up and spit him out. I ran out of money in a week, he said, his voice muffled by the glass. I sold my watch. I sold my cufflinks. I slept in a shelter for 2 nights, Dad. A homeless shelter. I didn't move. I just listened. This was his blues, and he had to play it. And I finally found this job, washing dishes, for minimum wage. It's awful. It's hot and it stinks, and my hands, they're bleeding. He turned around. He held up his hands, his soft, manicured executive hands. They were red raw with blisters on the palms. And you know what the worst part is? He asked, his voice breaking into a sob. The whole time I was scrubbing those plates, the whole time I was trying to get the egg yolk off a fork, all I could think about was you. He stumbled forward and collapsed into one of the leather chairs, burying his face in his raw hands. All I could think, he wept, was, my father did this. Not the money, not the disinheriting, but this. Work. Real, hard work. The kind that makes you ache. The kind that makes your hands bleed. He looked up at me, his face a ruin of shame. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I spent my whole life looking down on you. I thought you were a failure. I was so embarrassed by you. Your apartment, your old clothes, your music. I thought I was the successful one. I thought I was the one who'd made it. And I was just a parasite. I was just living off what you built. He broke down, ugly sobs racking his body. I'm not a failure like you, Dad, he choked out. I'm not even a man. I'm nothing. I just sat there behind Serafina's desk and I just listened. I watched my 45-year-old son, the man who had called me a failure his entire life, completely unravel in front of me. His body was shaking. The sobs were deep, agonizing. They were the sound of a man who had hit the very bottom. He cried for a long time. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. I didn't offer him a tissue. I didn't offer him comfort. This wasn't my moment. It was his. He had to get it all out. Finally, the sobs subsided into choked, ragged breaths. He wiped his face, not with a handkerchief, but with the sleeve of his cheap jacket. He looked like a child. Dad, he whispered, his voice raw from crying. I'm not here. I'm not here to ask you for anything. I'm not here for money. I don't want the job back. I don't want anything. He looked up and his eyes, they were clear for the first time. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. The anger was gone. All that was left was this raw, horrifying, empty space. I came to apologize, he said. I just nodded, my face a mask of stone. You've said that. No, he said, shaking his head. No, I mean, I'm not apologizing for the money. Not just for that. I'm apologizing because I never saw you. His words hung in the air. My whole life, he continued, his voice trembling. I was so busy, so obsessed with looking at her, at Mom, at the penthouse, at the power, at the shine of it all. I was like a moth just flying right at her light. And I never once turned my head to see who was standing right next to me. He looked at me, really looked at me. You, he whispered. You were always there, in that apartment, with your music. You were the real one. You were the one who was just there. And I missed it. I missed my entire life with you because I was too busy looking at her. I missed the most important person. I felt something in my chest. Ache. A sharp, sudden pain. The son I had been waiting for 45 years, had finally shown up. But he had to lose $83 million to find the door. He wasn't finished. The confession was still pouring out of him. This was the first honest moment of his life. And Karen, he choked out the name, tasting like ash in his mouth. I tensed. It wasn't just her dad, he said, forcing the words out, his eyes squeezing shut in shame. The 250,000, the Cayman account. I knew. I just stared. I thought I had felt the deepest betrayal. But I was wrong. There was one more layer. She came to me, he stammered. 3 years ago. She said the trust was too restrictive. She said Mom was treating me like a child. She found a loophole, a way to liberate the funds. And you let her, I said. It wasn't a question. I helped her. He confessed, the word ripping out of his throat. I signed the first transfer paper. I told myself I deserved it. Deserved it. I worked for her my whole life. He cried, the old arrogance flaring for just a second, a pathetic dying ember. I did everything she asked. I was her puppet. I gave up my whole life to be Serafina's son. I thought it was my bonus, my reward for putting up with her, for putting up with everything. He looked down, his voice dropping to a whisper of self-loathing. I wanted a piece of it, just for me, a piece she couldn't control, a piece you didn't know about. I was a thief, Dad. Just like her, just like Karen. I'm no better than she is. I just sat there. I took in the information. He knew. He had helped. He had justified it. And I realized Serafina had known. When she'd called me, her voice thin as paper. He's bleeding the company, Joe. He thinks I'm not watching. She hadn't just meant his expense accounts. She knew about Karen. She knew about the trust. She knew both of them were stealing from her. And in that moment, I finally understood her will. I looked at my son, a broken, weeping, confessed embezzler, and I felt nothing. No rage, no anger, just a vast, cold, empty pity. He was silent, just breathing, waiting for me to yell, to condemn him, to call the police, just like I had with his wife. He looked up, confused by my silence. Dad? He saw the look on my face, the pity, and it broke him more than the anger ever could. Don't, he whispered. Don't Don't look at me like that." He scrambled to his feet, backing away from my desk. I get it now." "Get what, Marcus?" "The will," he said, his voice dawning with a new, fresh horror. Mom leaving everything to you." He was putting the pieces together, the final devastating pieces. It wasn't to punish me, not just to punish me. He looked at me, his eyes wide with the terrible, brilliant final truth. She knew. She knew I was a thief. She knew I was weak. She knew I would have burned it all to the ground. The 83 million, it would have been gone. I would have gambled it. Karen would have spent it. We would have destroyed it all. He leaned against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. She didn't disinherit me to punish me. He whispered the words, coming from a place of absolute soul-crushing understanding. She did it to save me. I just sat there in the silence as my son finally understood the truth. He wasn't a shark. He wasn't a king. He was just a drowning man. And his mother, his brilliant, ruthless, magnificent mother, her last act on earth had been to throw him out of the boat so he would finally be forced to learn how to swim. I let him sit there on the floor of my office, a 45-year-old man in a ruined suit, his confession hanging in the silent, expensive air. I watched the shame and the self-loathing wash over him, and I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold quiet. The anger was gone. The shock was gone. All that was left was the truth. I stood up. My knees ached as they always do. I walked past him. I didn't offer him a hand. I couldn't. Not yet. I walked over to the massive window that Serafina had loved so much. It overlooked all of Central Park, all of the city she had conquered. Our city. "You see all this, Marcus?" I asked. My voice was just a low hum against the glass. He didn't answer. He just sobbed quietly on the floor. "Your mother and I said, we didn't start up here. We started in a basement apartment in Harlem. One room, a hot plate, and a mattress on the floor. We started with $200 I'd saved from playing piano in smoky dive bars. And a dream." I turned to look at him, a crumpled heap on Serafina's imported rug. "You've been looking at this your whole life," I said, gesturing to the skyline. "The 83 million, the penthouses, the cars, the result. You never once, not for 1 second, bothered to look at the work. You think this just appeared? I remember nights I'd play a gig until 4 a.m, my fingers raw, and I'd meet your mother at an all-night diner. She'd be on her 5th cup of coffee, her eyes blazing, running numbers on a napkin, fighting with contractors on a payphone. We built this Marcus. Brick by bloody brick. She'd go into those boardrooms, a black woman in the 70s, and tear those old money dinosaurs to shreds. And I'd be walking the streets feeling the rhythm, finding the next neighborhood, the next dump that was about to become gold 10 years before anyone else. I walked back to the desk, his desk, her desk, my desk. "You see this money," I said. "You see it as a prize. You think it's the goal. It's not. It's just the receipt. It's the proof that we did the work. It's not the prize itself." I sat down in the heavy leather chair. "You wanted it. You wanted it so badly you stole from your mother while she was dying. You plotted with your wife. You were ready to let her go to prison just to save your own skin." He flinched, pulling his knees to his chest. "So let me be very, very clear, son," I said, my voice flat and final. "I am not giving you a job in the boardroom. I am not putting you in charge of anything. I am not giving you an expense account. I am not giving you one single solitary dime of this money." He finally looked up. His face was a mask of pure abject despair. He had come here confessed, bared his soul, hoping that old Joe, the soft touch, the failure, the man he'd despised, would give him something. And I had given him nothing. I understand," he whispered, his voice completely broken. He used the arms of a nearby chair to pull himself up, his legs shaking. He looked like an old man, older than me. I get it. I just wanted you to know." He turned a man with absolutely nothing. No job, no wife, no home, no money, no future. He was walking toward the door, a ghost in an empty suit. He was going back to the dish pit in Queens or to the homeless shelter. He was going to walk out. And I knew, as sure as I knew my own name, he wouldn't survive. Serafina was right. He was weak. He didn't have the rhythm. He didn't have the fight. He would be dead in a year. "Fix our son," she'd said. "Damn you, Sarah. You always left the hard parts to me." His hand was on the doorknob. "But I will give you an opportunity," I said. He stopped. His back was to me. He didn't turn around. I saw his shoulders tense. "What?" he whispered. "I'm not giving you a salary," I said. "I'm giving you a job. You want to be in this company, the company I built, fine. You can be in it, the same way I started." He slowly turned around his face, a mask of confusion. What are you talking about, sweeping floors?" "Sweeping floors was my job," I said. "You're not me. You're not going to be a musician. You're going to be a janitor." A janitor." The word came out of him like a cough. The sheer insult of it was more than he could process. "Starting tomorrow," I said, leaning back in my chair. 6 a.m. You'll report to the building manager, in the basement, of this very building. Your name will be Marcus, just Marcus. You will wear the uniform. You will clean the bathrooms on floors 20 through 30. You will empty the trash. You will scrub the marble in the lobby that you used to walk across like you owned it." He was horrified. "Dad, you can't be serious. That's humiliation." "No," I said, my voice hard as steel. "Washing dishes in Queens when you think no one is looking. That's humiliation. Doing honest work right here in the light where every single person who ever kissed your boots can see you, that's penance. They'll laugh at me." "Yes," I said. They will. They will laugh. They will whisper. They will point. They will treat you exactly like you and your wife treated me, and you will take it. You will clock in, you will do the work, and you will clock out. You will earn minimum wage, and you will find a room to rent in Queens or the Bronx, and you will pay for it with the money you earn scrubbing toilets." I can't. "You will do that," I continued, "for 1 year, 12 months. If you are late, once you're fired. If you talk back to your supervisor, once you're fired. If you quit, I will never speak your name again. But if you finish, if you show up every single day and you do the work and you don't complain, then on day 366, you can come back to this office and we can talk." He just stood there, the reality of the offer hitting him. It was a life raft, made of lead. "You want a chance, Marcus?" I asked, my voice softer now. "You want to know what it feels like to earn something? Here it is." I pointed to the floor. "Just like I told you," I said. "You're going to start at the very bottom." The next morning, the sun hadn't even thought about touching the tops of the buildings. It was 6 a.m. The city was still a wash of gray and dark blue. Marcus Bishop stood in the center of the Bishop Enterprises lobby. The marble floor, the one he used to cross in 5 long, confident strides, now stretched out before him like a cold, white ocean. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was wearing a plain blue work uniform, stiff, cheap, and a size too large. It smelled like industrial bleach. In his hands, he wasn't holding a leather briefcase. He was holding a heavy, wet mop. His new supervisor, a tough old man named Sal, who had worked in this basement for 40 years, had just finished giving him his orders. "You start with the lobby. It has to be spotless before the suits get here at 8. No streaks. You leave a streak, you do it again. You got me, Marcus?" Marcus had just nodded. "Yes, Sal." "Good. Don't call me Sal. Call me Mr. Rodriguez." Now he was alone. Just him and the bucket of gray water. He dipped the mop in, wrung it out, and started. The shh of the mop was the only sound in the massive empty space. This was it. This was his new reality. At 7:30, the first of the early bird analysts started to arrive. Young, hungry kids in sharp suits clutching their coffees. They walked past him without a second glance. He was just part of the furniture, invisible, just like they had been to him a week ago. At 8 o'clock, the main rush began. The glass door spun as the executives, the bankers, the vice presidents, his people, his former colleagues, began to pour in. At first, no one recognized him. Why would they? They were looking straight ahead, focused on the stock market, on their morning meetings, on their own reflections in the polished brass. Then a woman stopped, a vice president of marketing, a woman he'd had lunch with, a woman he'd dated briefly a few years ago. She stopped her phone halfway to her ear. Her eyes widened. "Marcus?" she whispered, her voice full of disbelief. Marcus didn't look up. He couldn't. He just kept mopping his face, burning a hot, terrible shame crawling up his neck. "Oh my God," she said. She didn't move. She just stared. Her stopping made other people stop. Like a log jam in a river. People turned. They looked at her. They followed her gaze. And then they saw him. A wave of whispers started, a low, hissing sound that spread through the lobby like a gas leak. "Is that? It is. It's him. My God, what is he wearing? That's Marcus Bishop, Serafina's son. I told you I heard he was fired. But this a janitor. Shh, he can hear you. I don't care. Serves him right. You know what he and his wife did, I heard." They walked past him one by one, their eyes full of shock or pity or, worst of all, amusement. They saw the Prince of Park Avenue, the heir apparent, the $83 million man pushing dirty water across a floor. It was the best gossip they'd have all year. He just kept mopping. Shh. He focused on the floor, on the water, on the single driving thought, don't look up, don't look up, don't look up. 50 floors above, in Serafina's office, I stood in front of a wall of security monitors. The technology was incredible. I could zoom in. I could see the label on the coffee cup in an analyst's hand, and I could see my son's face. I watched him. I watched the marketing VP stop. I watched the whispers start. I watched the color rise in his neck. I watched him clench his jaw so hard I was surprised his teeth didn't crack. The door to my office opened, and Alistair walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. Cynthia made it fresh. Oh. He stopped seeing what I was watching. He walked over and stood beside me, his own coffee cup halfway to his mouth. He watched for a long, quiet minute. He saw Marcus wring out the mop, his hands clumsy, his movements stiff and full of humiliation. "Joe," Alistair said, his voice low. "I've backed some questionable plays in my life. I've defended guilty men. I've done things in a courtroom that I'm not proud of. But this..." He took a sip of his coffee. "This is torture." "Is it?" I murmured, my eyes never leaving the screen. "You're destroying him. You're not just taking his money, you're taking his name. You're putting him in a cage for everyone to throw peanuts at. This isn't penance, Joe. This is cruel." I didn't answer. I just watched. Down in the lobby, a young analyst, a kid Marcus had probably hired, was walking by. He looked at Marcus, looked around to see if anyone was watching, and then he accidentally dropped his crumpled napkin right in the middle of the clean, wet floor Marcus had just mopped. "Oops." The kid smirked. "Clean that up, would you, Marcus? Thanks." The kid walked off laughing to himself. On the screen, I watched my son. He stopped mopping. He stood still for a full 10 seconds. His back was to the camera, but I could see his shoulders tense up. I could see the rage. This was it. This was the moment he would throw the mop down, tell them all to go to hell, and walk out that door forever. The moment he would prove he was still his mother's arrogant, entitled son. I held my breath. And then Marcus just bent over. He bent over, picked up the soggy napkin with his bare hand, dropped it into the trash can on his cart, and he kept mopping. Alistair let out a slow breath beside me. My God. I turned away from the monitors. I finally turned away. I walked to my desk and picked up my own coffee. "I'm not torturing him, Alistair," I said, my voice quiet. "I'm teaching him." Alistair looked at me confused. "Teaching him how to scrub floors?" "No," I said. "I'm teaching him what he never learned. I'm teaching him how to be invisible. I'm teaching him what it feels like to be the old man in the corner, to be the one everyone whispers about, to be the one who doesn't fit in." I took a sip. The coffee was hot. It was good. "I'm not watching him to torture him, Alistair. I'm watching him to see if he'll quit. And if he does..." I looked back at the screen. Marcus was still there, still mopping. "If he quits," I said, "if he walks out that door because his pride is more important than the work, then he's not my son. He's just a failed experiment. A ghost. Serafina was right, and I'll sell this company and give every penny to that cat shelter. And if he stays," Alistair asked. I watched my son, my 45-year-old son, scrubbing the floor where he used to be a prince. If he stays, I whispered. If he can swallow that poison and show up again tomorrow at 6 a.m., and the day after that, then maybe. Just maybe. I looked at Alistair. Maybe there's still a bishop in there left to save. 6 months passed. Winter turned to a cold, wet spring. I watched him. Not every day, but I watched. I watched him on the monitors scrubbing graffiti off the bathroom stalls. I watched him on the loading dock at 5 a.m., bundled in a thin coat signing for deliveries of toilet paper. I watched him get chewed out by Sal Rodriguez for leaving a smudge on the elevator's brass plating. He never talked back. He never raised his voice. He just did the work. Alistair gave me the reports. He's living in a single-room occupancy in the Bronx, he told me over our weekly bourbon. He takes the subway 2 hours each way. He hasn't missed a single day, Joe. Not one. 3 months and Sal Rodriguez promoted him, not to manager, to shift supervisor for the night crew, a 50-cent an hour raise. He now managed 3 other janitors. I watched him on the camera, not mopping anymore, but teaching a new kid how to use the floor buffer. He was patient, he was thorough, he was quiet, the arrogance was gone, the entitlement was gone, he just looked tired. But he also looked solid. Then 6 months to the day after he started, I got another call from Alistair. "You're not going to believe this," Alistair said. "He's visiting Karen." He had gone to the prison upstate. I had Alistair arrange for me to hear the audio from the visitor's room. I needed to. I sat in my office and listened. The call was short. "Marcus," Karen's voice said. It was thin, weak. You came. I came." His voice was deeper now, less sharp. "How are you, Karen?" "I'm okay. They have me working in the library. It's quiet." There was a long silence. I heard him take a breath. "Karen," he said, I'm sorry." I heard her start to cry, a small hiccuping sound. "What?" "I'm sorry," he repeated. For what I did. For who I was. I pushed you. I was weak and I was greedy and I let you believe that we deserved all that. I'm sorry I let you take the fall alone. It was my fault too. All of it." "No, Marcus," she wept. I stole from you." "We stole from them," he replied. "And we stole from ourselves. I wanted to say, I don't hate you, Karen. I forgive you." I heard her sob. "Thank you. God, Marcus. Thank you." "Goodbye, Karen," he said. "Goodbye, Marcus." That was it. I turned off the speaker. He had apologized. He had taken responsibility. He had forgiven. He was finally a man. That evening I was home in Harlem. I was sitting at my piano, just letting my fingers rest on the keys. I heard a knock. Not the sharp, arrogant knock from before, a quiet, hesitant knock. I opened the door. It was Marcus. He was wearing his blue janitor's uniform. He looked exhausted. His hands, I noticed, were calloused. They were rough. They looked like my hands. He was holding a small paper-wrapped bouquet of bodega flowers. "Hi, Dad," he said. "You're late for your shift," I said. I know. I took the night off. Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked into the apartment he had once called a rat hole. He looked around, but this time he wasn't seeing the old furniture. He was seeing the home. It smells the same," he whispered. Like coffee and old books. Like you." He stood in the middle of my living room, shifting his weight, still holding the cheap flowers. "What do you want, Marcus?" He took a deep breath. He walked over and he placed the flowers on top of my piano. "I get it now," he said, his voice quiet but clear. He wasn't crying. He wasn't begging. He was stating a fact. I get it, he repeated. All these months, scrubbing floors, I've been thinking about you, about Mom. He turned to me. She didn't leave you the money to make you rich, did she? You were already rich. I just looked at him. She left it to you, he said, his voice dawning with the full final truth, because she trusted you. She knew you wouldn't burn it. You wouldn't waste it on cars and stupid shiny things. You'd protect it because you built it. He looked at his own calloused hands, the ones that looked like mine. Work, he whispered. Respect. It doesn't come from a bank account, does it? It doesn't come from a business card. He looked at me, his eyes finally meeting mine, man to man. It comes from this, he said, holding up his hands. From the work. From just showing up. I nodded. Slowly. Yes, son, it does. He stood there in his janitor's uniform in my small apartment, and I had never been more proud of him in his entire life. So, what now? He asked. Am I fired for coming here? I smiled, a real smile. The first one I'd felt for him in a long, long time. No, son, I said. You're not fired, but you're not getting the $83 million either. He just nodded. I know. I don't want it. I wouldn't know what to do with it. Not really. Good, I said. Because nobody should inherit $83 million. It's a curse. It's a poison. It almost destroyed your mother. It did destroy you. I walked to my desk where a new set of folders from Alistair was waiting. So, I said, we're going to give it away. 90% of it. Marcus's eyes widened. 90%. That's almost $75 million. That's right, I said. I'm announcing it tomorrow. The Serafina and Josiah Bishop Foundation. A foundation for what? For what we came from, I said. We're going to build affordable housing in Harlem and the Bronx and Brooklyn. Real places for real people. We're going to fund music programs in every public school in this city. We're going to give kids who started like us a chance. A real chance. Wow, Marcus whispered. That's incredible, Dad. That's right. Mom would have loved that. Yes, I said. She would have. Well, congratulations, Dad, he said, turning to leave. That's the best thing I've ever heard. I guess I should go. I have to get the subway back to the Bronx. Where do you think you're going? I asked. He stopped confused. To my room, to the Bronx. You're not a janitor anymore, Marcus, I said. He looked at me, hope and fear warring in his eyes. I'm not. No, that job is finished. You passed the test. I tossed him a set of keys from my desk. Not keys to a penthouse, not keys to a Bentley, just keys. What's this? It's a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, over one of our new properties. It's small, the rent is cheap, and it's yours if you want the new job. What new job? He asked, his voice trembling. I smiled. I need someone to manage the new housing projects, son. Someone who knows the properties, someone who knows the value of the work. Someone who isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. I pointed to his uniform. And someone who already has the right clothes for the job. You're not starting at the bottom anymore, Marcus. You're starting at the foundation. 1 year later. The club was the same. Dark, warm, and smelling of smoke, old wood, and spilled bourbon. The click of glasses was the same. The low murmur of the crowd was the same. And I was the same. I sat at my piano, my old upright in my corner. My fingers, calloused now from more than just piano keys, found their familiar home. I wasn't in a $10,000 suit. I was in my old comfortable jacket. The $83 million man, the chairman of Bishop Enterprises, was just Joe, playing piano on a Thursday night in Harlem. I'd been in the boardroom all day. I'd fought with architects. I'd argued with city council members. I'd signed checks for amounts that still made my head spin. I'd spent the day moving mountains. But at night, I came home. I came here to feel the rhythm. I was playing a slow, easy tune, something soft, something for myself. Alistair was at the bar in his usual spot in the shadows, a glass of bourbon in his hand. He came every Thursday now. He said it was to protect his investment. I knew it was because he just liked the music. The club door opened, letting in a slice of the cold November night and the sound of a distant siren. A man walked in. He wasn't the boy in the janitor's uniform. He wasn't the prince in the $5,000 suit. This was a man. He wore a good suit, a simple dark gray suit that fit him well. It wasn't flashy, it was respectful. It was the suit of a man who goes to work. He nodded to Maya, the bartender, who smiled at him. "Evening, Mr. Bishop." "Evening, Maya," he said, his voice quiet, confident. He walked over to the bar and sat down next to Alistair. Alistair didn't look up from his drink. "You're late, Marcus." I kept playing my fingers soft on the keys, but my ears were wide open. Marcus took off his coat and signaled Maya for a ginger ale, just like his old man. "Sorry," Marcus said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I got held up. I had to check on those 3 new lots over in the Bronx." Alistair just grunted, swirling his bourbon. "The Bronx, that's what you pay surveyors for, kid. You're a project manager now, not a janitor. You don't get paid to walk in the mud." I heard Marcus take a sip of his drink. "Yeah, I know. I read the surveyor's report. It looked fine on paper, but what?" Alistair asked, his voice curious. There was a pause, and then my son said the words I had waited his entire life to hear. "But Dad taught me," Marcus said, his voice simple, clear, and full of a quiet certainty. "You can't ever just trust the report. You have to go yourself. You have to feel the land. You got to check the rhythm of the street." He let out a small laugh. "The report was wrong. The city maps are outdated. The rhythm is all off. The new subway line, it's not going to bring the foot traffic they think. It's a bad investment. I'm killing the deal tomorrow." Alistair was silent for a long, long time. I heard the sound of his glass setting down on the bar. "The rhythm of the street, huh?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "You wouldn't understand. It's a Joe thing." I stopped playing. My fingers just rested on the keys. The chatter of the club rushed in to fill the silence. He'd done it. He had finally done it. He wasn't just working the job. He was thinking like me. He was thinking like a builder. He had stopped looking at the money and had started listening to the music. He had found the map. Alistair turned on his stool. I couldn't see him, but I knew he was looking at me. "Joe," he called out across the room. "You going to take a break, or are you just going to sit there looking smug?" I smiled. A real smile. A smile so light I felt like I was floating. I looked down at my hands, my old, calloused 77-year-old hands. "Fix our son," Serafina had demanded. I took a deep breath. My fingers moved. They didn't play the blues. They didn't play a war drum. They started to play a slow, beautiful, complicated ballad. An old Hoagie Carmichael tune. Stardust. It was Serafina's favorite song, the one I used to play for her all those years ago on the fire escape in Brooklyn when we were poor and happy and had the whole world at our feet. Marcus turned around. His eyes met mine across the smoky room. He didn't say anything. He just listened. And he smiled. I closed my eyes and I played. I played for Serafina. I played for the kid in the janitor's uniform. And I played for the man who had finally come home. The legacy was safe. This story teaches us that true worth is not measured by the balance in your bank account, but by the integrity in your heart. Greed and disrespect build a house of cards easily toppled by the weight of truth. Respect, like wealth, must be earned, not just inherited. In the end, humility is the only currency that never loses its value, and the greatest legacy you can leave is not money, but a life built on honor that inspires others to do the same. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.